Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to council meeting this beautiful October 10th day. I hope everyone that's around this table and those that are in the gallery that you kind of confronted me, because I did gain some weight when I walked in here, and it is the turkey talking, not myself. So I appreciate everyone noticing that and telling me that I look like a turkey. But it was a wonderful weekend. We celebrated Thanksgiving with a lot of friends and family. Hopefully everybody had the opportunity to enjoy each other's company and, again, eat more turkey. And if you want to buy good stretchy pants, come talk to me. I'll let you know where to get some. With that, Mayor and Mr. Council, we have an agenda before you. Deputy Mayor.
Town Council adopt the October 10th, 2023 regular council meeting agenda as presented.
Thank you. Administration, anything to add?
Nothing to add at this time, Your Worship.
Thank you. I'll call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, moving on. Our agenda number 3 is the public input session. This is the time that we allow residents to address council on anything that's not on the current agenda. Administration, has anybody made a submission to present?
Through Your Worship, no one has registered this evening.
Okay, thank you. With that, anybody in the audience and gallery would like to speak to council on anything that's not on the current agenda tonight? Okay, seeing none, move on to number 4 of our agenda, which is presentations and delegations. And today we have 2 presentations. I'm not too sure why they sat across the gallery from each other. I don't know if it's an omen or a sign, but I see 2 presentations and they're both sitting on opposite sides of the gallery today. So first up is the Stony Plain Public Library. So welcome. There is a sign-up sheet if you can just sign your names, and then there's a mic. You have to push the mic button so it's red, and then you can speak. And please introduce yourselves to members of council.
So good evening, or good afternoon. I don't know at 5 o'clock what the proper introduction is. My name is Brenda Spitzer, and next to me is Don Horn, and we are from the Stony Plain Public Library Board. We're excited to share with you our year-to-date and our plans for 2024. Over the last year, we have seen a resurgence of interest in our library. Our use levels have returned to and surpassed pre-COVID levels. As I'm sure you are aware, our new location opened during the pandemic. Today, we are able to look forward and start shifting away from service in a strip mall to full library service in a purpose-built, modern facility. We have also experienced significant changes and turnover in our directors and our trustees. In response to these recent, unexpected, and unplanned organizational changes, the board has chosen to contract Dr. Margaret Law to perform a governance and operational review of the library to allow us to move forward in alignment with the town. Dr. Law specializes in public library governance and operations, and she is highly respected in her field. She's worked with the Yellowhead Regional Library, the boards of the St. Albert Public Library, Grand Prairie Public Library, Airdrie Public Library, Leduc Public Library, and Hinton Public Library. We're very excited for what this means for our board, our staff, and ultimately our community. Okay, so this graphic illustrates how libraries support our community, and we can confidently say that our library supports our community in all of these areas. Libraries are so much more than books. We provide a safe and inclusive place for everyone. This is a place where long-standing community members as well as newcomers come to gather, learn, and to connect. We've heard it said that it is one of the few places that families can go where there is no expectation to purchase anything. In fact, last week, our library received an email from a patron who was writing to let the staff know how happy his children were with the programs that they were attending. His exact words were, "A free program that is available to anyone in the area, and there are not many free activities for kids." Libraries are hubs that serve as an important role in employment, economic development, and we contribute to a vibrant community. 2 public consultations and 1 stakeholder consultation were held in the spring of 2023 to assist in the development of our 2024 to 2029 plan of service. As well, in preparation, 150 surveys were submitted. What we overwhelmingly heard was first that the community loves our staff and our new library. We also heard that there is a need for more programming and longer hours. We want to work together with council to support community priorities to align ourselves with the growth of Stony Plain. So what do our patrons have to say? You can read here a couple of quotes. So service levels continue to grow. Our staff are stretched to their limits, which is not allowing us to provide the additional programming that reflect our community's needs and our population growth. These numbers reflect to the end of August 2023, and we foresee continued growth right through to the end of the year.
I'll speak to the budget process. As part of the budget process, the Stony Plain Public Library Director will meet with the town administrator to understand the town's priorities. The director then prepares 3 funding scenarios addressing operational and strategic priorities for review for the SPPL Finance Committee based on the information from the town. The Finance Committee reviews and recommends 1 scenario for the board. For our 2024 strategic initiatives, the board recognizes that a need for the community is increased access to the physical location and programming during times that meet their needs. Pending the results of the organizational review, the board believes that they will be working towards increased programming and services. The next step is the governance review, and that's part of our fiscal sustainability goal. The governance review will cover 3 items. First, the board, how the board operates. Are we operating efficiently, effectively? Secondly, operations. An in-depth review of the operations of the library will be done to ensure that we are utilizing the best use of time, space, and staff. We want to ensure that we'll be able to meet the growing needs of our community with appropriate services as Stony Plain moves towards a population of 30,000. Lastly, the review will assist with hiring a new director. To do this properly, there's some things that need to be reviewed. We're starting that recruiting process now. We're going to be reviewing the job description, our expectations. We're going to focus on hiring a director who will be vested not only in our library, but in our community. And then we'll advertise appropriately. Oh, am I too far? Having planned reserves is a good fiduciary practice, and this is true for libraries. We, as a library board, need to ensure that we have the resources to manage staff and facility costs. And this would include planned expenditures where the amounts are higher than can be borne from 1 year's operational budget. Ideally, we should have between 6 and 9 months of operational costs in reserve. This would assist the board if our provincial operating grant is late, and having reserves mean we can still operate. A capital replacement reserve is also good fiduciary management. This would permit the board to plan for replacements of furniture, equipment, and plan for maintenance and replacement of the facility. To work towards these goals and work towards the goals of the town, we are requesting an additional $30,000. The major spending areas are staffing, to bring staffing levels up to where they need to be, recognizing that our staffing levels reflected old building needs and not new building and higher service demands. Our planned review will address any operational changes that need to be made, and we've already started. We've submitted a budget document to accompany this presentation, and it is included in your package. And I just want to add, this summer I attended one of the storytelling sessions at Shikawi Park. It was about newcomers to Canada. And I don't remember much about what each of the people had told in their stories, but what I do remember is when they were asked what their favorite English word was, it was library.
So in conclusion, our ask of $30,000 over what we received in 2023 will allow us to continue to offer the services and the staff that our patrons love. We want to be able to provide our growing population the library that they want and the library that they deserve. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. Definitely great to hear that the users are coming back, the programs are starting to pick up, and 100% agree with what a lot of your sentiments are. As an immigrant to Canada and not speaking English, I grew up with a library when the library was over at the community center, when it moved down the street to the Parkland building, and when it moved down to Forest Green Plaza. So I am actually a product of our school system and the library system that we have in Stony Plain. So definitely appreciative of the work, and your story about the newcomers for the, I think it was cultural campfires, talking about, yes, because that's an area where people can still access materials from different languages, different cultures, and then there's very little barriers in terms of somebody coming in and using the facilities without having to pay or just spending a couple hours there reading a magazine. That helps their English comprehension quite a bit. Personal experience, I did a lot of reading, scratch and sniff books, Harley Boys and all those good books that I used to read. That's gave me the ability to be here today, so thank you for the library for that. Members of council, any questions and comments of clarity to the presentation? Councillor Hansard, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would you define cost avoidance in your budget process? You use the term cost avoidance to describe various entries.
Okay, I am not sure exactly what you are referring to, but I will definitely.
Let me see if I can find an example. Okay, that's one little question.
Okay.
Sorry? That's YRL. Oh, that's YRL. I'll ask that question of them. They can prepare their answer. Okay, I do have another question, Your Worship. I'm just curious, the library, Stony Plain Library, actually had what I would consider a good financial year. You had actually a bit of surplus, is that correct, this year? And your expenses and your revenues pretty much match. Why are you asking for a $30,000 increase?
Well, first of all, we're not at the year end yet. And we do want to work towards the fiscal sustainability and create the reserve funds.
Okay, thank you. And one other, Your Worship.
Go ahead.
the library states in its presentation that every year you come to the council for a request. Is that for funding no matter what it is? Even if it stayed the same, you would feel you would have to come to us and make a budget request? Or is there always anticipated that there's going to be an increase, therefore you would be coming to ask for that increase every year?
Well, as our programs and our population grow, staffing needs to be increased. Our costs do increase. And from what I've seen, and I'm fairly new in this role, the funding levels haven't necessarily changed that much over the last few years. So as our population grows and our needs grow, then we do need to fund those changes somehow.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Laurie?
Thank you, Your Worship. Two questions that I have, and first is at the tail end of the presentation, you mentioned a separate budget document that had been included. I don't see a separate budget document.
You
That is
provided
not
with
in our
that?
package.
Okay. All
Can we
right.
have that emailed to us? Or,
Your Worship, through the Council, Laurie, we can certainly get that document, and if deemed appropriate for council, we'll pass it on to you.
excellent, thank you. And I liken this to the presentation that we saw from the TLC, and there was a lot more information in the TLC's presentation about where the revenues and expenses, et cetera, were generated, where they're coming from, and I'm assuming a lot of that would be on there, so I'm looking forward to seeing that. One of the questions that I do have is page 15 and 16 of our package. It's the charts in regards to the last 3 years. Now, it does say that the data is up to date as of August 31st, 2023, but what I'm wondering is, are the prior years comparators for the same snapshot of time? So is this showing me January 1st to August 31st of 2022 comparative, or is this showing me all of 2022 compared to January to August 31st?
You go ahead.
Yeah, that second one. Sorry. Yeah, the 2022 is for all of 2022. The 2023 is up to the end of August of 2023.
Okay, thank you. And that kind of helps me a little bit on it, because it's hard to really understand the trend only having that information to August, or I think there's a couple that say September 7th. So from a recommendation standpoint, I think it would be more valuable to have that comparative to the same period of time to understand if, by August 31st, if we're already trending higher than the previous year. That kind of shows, because right now I can't really correlate that to understand where the library will land at the end of the year, as if it would be more or less than the previous year.
Would you like us to get those, to try to get those for you?
If that segmented data is available, that could be provided to us so that we could see.
No, we'll look
year over
into
year.
it and see if we can get those stats to compare like that, and if we can, we'll get them to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the presentation. It helps to understand things a little bit. But as I read through the package, and I read it twice because I wasn't sure I wasn't missing something. Quite often when you're doing your budget, you'll have surplus that's in your budget, and having staff members that are no longer there, have you taken into consideration the surplus that you will have gained from that when you've asked for the additional $30,000?
So when you're talking about staff members that are no longer there, are you referring to the director?
I'm referring to anybody that may have not been there that you will have not had to pay that salary out to.
Okay, so when we're talking about library assistants, there hasn't been a lot of turnover, and we've actually increased from part-time to full-time So that's where there's been some increases in our budget for that. So it's not going to be, other than the director's salary, which we are working on that, and there's just a short period of time where we will be without a director, so that is, it's in there, but it's not a considerable amount.
And we do have an acting interim director, so we haven't been really very long without paying that salary. And then hiring Dr. Law adds to that as well, adds to our expenses as well.
Thank you.
Great. That was a good question. Thanks, Councilor Pletchko. And I'd actually add to that. I was sitting as ex officio on that meeting when the budget was adopted, and that conversation came around about being a surplus because of the changing in terms of personnel and having the library director not being here. Those dollars in savings will be eaten up by the increase in salaries for current staff and increasing time, as mentioned. And also then the motion was, if I recall correctly, passed by the board, was to take any additional dollars that would be in savings was to contract and hire Dr. Law to do the governance review, the organization review, and then help with finding a new executive director. And because this is a budget that has to be year to year, so we can't, I think the library board cannot predict if there's going to be a surplus or not until after the year is closed. So that's why the increase is coming forward.
Sorry, if I could just add to that and just highlight, you briefly mentioned, there's a couple of part-time staff that were sitting at roughly 34 hours a week, so just an hour under full-time employment. And so their additional hour, even though it's not a significant salary, but the benefits, going from a part-time to a full-time was a significant increase to the salary budget there. And it will be, going forward.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Councilor Meyer, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for clarification, as Councillor Hansard had asked about where this money was supposed to go, the $30,000, it was mentioned that it's supposed to help top up reserves, but you've also now said it's for salary. So can I just get clarification exactly of this $30,000, what is salary and what is for reserves?
We won't be, the 30,000 won't be going to reserves, it'll be going to mostly to staff salaries. We would like to try to bump up some part-time employees to full-time so that we can eventually add more programming and more opening hours.
No, I'll leave it for them, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions for clarity and understanding? Oh, okay, see none. Thank you for the presentation and definitely looking at the report there. Thank you for stepping in as the chair and treasurer. Definitely appreciate the work that the library has done. As you know, from a little story, I do support the library. I think the library plays a huge role in the community. As I've said many times, I've had the privilege of watching the library grow and being on council when the new library was built. Libraries are no longer, as is mentioned, just bricks and mortar with books in it. It is a community hub and meeting place for many organizations to meet, gather, and people to feel safe and to actually build connections within the community. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and we really thank you for your support as well.
Okay, so members of council, moving on to 4.2 is the presentation from the Yellowhead Regional Library. And welcome. There is a sign-up sheet, and if you can introduce yourself to council before you start.
Well, good evening, everyone. I am Hank Smith. I am the chairperson of YRL, and we have a short presentation for you today, but I'd like to say, wow, Brenda and Dawn, great job on such short notice, guys. Like, wow, you guys got a special library here in this town now. Last time I was here, I was just talking to the nice lady over there in Strategic Services, and she remembered the date quite well. We were the presentation after Glockenspiel guy. And so everyone who was on council that day, that was quite the presentation, I have to admit. I keep driving around town looking for the Glockenspiel to be up and ready to go with that, but it hasn't happened as of yet, I think. I don't know, I came here kind of on a quarter of the hour, and of course it doesn't ring then, but then maybe that's something you guys may have to look into in the future anyway, so. Anyways, that's good. First of all, I'd like to introduce the other ladies beside me here. On my direct left is Lena Kelly. She is one of the managers at YRL. And beside her is our deputy director, which is Wendy Sears-Yelnicki. And she has taken her, because she is here because of Carla, our lovely director, has COVID, and she thought maybe it wasn't the greatest idea to come here and give everyone COVID, so. Okay. One more thing I would like to say is, Mr. Mayor, is that Eric is a great member of our executive and our board. He's been giving great ideas, and also his questions are relevant and pertinent. Okay, and so that's good to see that so much buy-in by a council member from this municipality. Thank you for that, Eric. Okay, from that on, that goes to Wendy.
Hi, so we'll go to the first slide, I think Lena here. Lena's going to be our mover and shaker here. We're the second oldest regional library system in the province. We're just about 14 years younger than Parkland. And as you know, regions are set up by the province, but they come together when municipalities get together and decide to create a region according to the Public Libraries Act. So one of the things we had was in 1971, 5 areas came together and created Yellowhead, and then other municipalities joined when their library board said this is a good idea. We don't, your library boards are autonomous, but you will follow certain provisions of our master membership agreement, which I think we get into in a little bit. And it's basically for us to provide you with service so that you can compete with big city ideas. Yellowhead's the only region that has a bunch of cities in it. And I know you call yourselves the town of Stony Plain, which is great, but you are one of our larger members as well, including Spruce Grove, Parkland County, and places like that. Okay, next slide. Now, you've already seen this slide because we think it's such a great one, but, and why is my papers not turning? But the biggest thing about this, when the library board just used it, it really is true that libraries are a hub for their community. And how YRL supports this hub is by providing the infrastructure that goes to this. So for example, we have a delivery service that moves the interlibrary loans around. We have the cataloging and acquisition of the materials that your library will purchase that gets then sent off to your library for the new materials. We have consultation services, which is in part where probably Margaret Law was first talked about with Stony Plain, was coming through Carla, our director, talking about if you need help, this is a good place to look forward for it. We also have access to the e-resources and things like that. All these things that a smaller place cannot afford. Frankly, only the large cities can afford, so that's why regions are great. So, oh, Lena's up.
All right. Thank you. So now we'd like to talk about some of the things we've done in the past year, 2022, and a little bit of 2023. You have, or should have all received a soft copy of our 2022 annual report in your package. Some of the highlights in this report are new and enlarged collections for our libraries to borrow from. So your library can borrow from our headquarters collection, and that includes items such as makerspace kits and other interesting kits and technology that would be difficult to afford on your own. Enhanced cybersecurity protocols for YRL and our member libraries, including password manager and cybersecurity training, again, very important in the insurance world right now. We also purchased a Librarian's Guide to Homelessness, which is a collection of 35 self-paced videos, and hosted an in-person crucial conversations workshops for library staff, facilitated by the Crisis and Trauma Resource Institute. This was all in addition to the regular services that we provide that are documented in our next slide. So here in this infographic, you can see some of our regular statistics about the items that move through our headquarters and head out to your libraries to serve your patrons. As you can see, services continued to flow seamlessly throughout 2022, such as deliveries, cataloging, processing, and training of library staff. Probably the most notable numbers on here are the number of on-site visits and virtual consultations that happened. So that's us working with public library staff members in their areas of need when they reach out to Yellowhead for a hand. And we have provided a lot of training to our public library members.
Thank you. So we have, our strategic plan is always 3 years. That's how it's set out by the Public Libraries Act. So basically, it's a business plan. We've just almost completed the first year of our strategic plan, and we have 4 main goals, which is on the next slide. So we are a hub for learning and connection, quality information. When we're talking about all of these goals, we're really talking about member library staff building new skills. We're talking about protecting assets. For example, last year we were able to finally get cyber insurance, a special customized formula for our library, and to help out with stuff, plans for sustainable funding. We're doing collection development, resources. How do we set that up? How do we make sure everything that we have in our own collection is working for your libraries and establishing good kits, good e-resources. For example, if somebody said, we don't really use this e-resource any longer, but we really like to get this one, we'll do an evaluation of it, and then we'll probably drop one and put a new one up. We're trying to be innovative. We've done a lot of consultation this year. Stony Plain is not the only place that is having trouble hiring library directors. We've been called in for a lot of advice on that alone, I think 3 or 4 different libraries. And we're working towards diversity, equity, inclusion, as everyone is, and good governance practices, and involved in board advocacy and in advocating to the province for more funds. So in 2023 year to date, advocacy was big. We did a whole toolkit for your libraries, and we actually, I feel, YRL and Parkland's push on this actually helped the province to increase the membership rates, the levy rates or operating grants that they've given to the public libraries, increasing the base grant as well as the 5 cents per capita, I think they put towards the operating grant. I think that did come out of that work. We've done website redesign for all our member libraries. We've done increased network security that Lena could speak to if you want, but it's a lot of extra work where we have monitoring going on constantly to make sure nothing's getting hacked. And we've also, and we hope some of you are coming to our new in-person conference that'll be happening this fall in November, as well as online conferences.
So our goals so far for 2024, while there's lots of work still to be done, a major goal is going to be continuing to address the remaining areas of potential cybersecurity threats. This is a landscape that's constantly changing, and we're working hard to stay up to date on that so that the network that your library is on can remain secure and problem-free.
Well, I guess this is me now, okay? Return on investment, of course, I better be good because Pat has a question here pertaining to it. So anyways, you have a soft copy of that in your package. The document represents value from the work and services that YRL provides to your library. First of all, the fee for for being part of a member of YRL is a signed document through a master membership agreement from the council to YRL, not the library to the YRL, okay, to give that service. There's a definite distinction there. And so, and there's lots of municipalities that do not understand that, but I wanted to make sure that you guys understand that well. So, okay, back to, of course, return on investment. The numbers refer to your library's access in 2022 related to the cost your municipality was able to avoid by being a part of the regional system. In other words, the cost you were able to avoid by paying, but we were able to provide because of your membership within YRL. Okay, next slide. Okay, next is levies. Okay, as you can tell, 11 years from 2008 to 2019, we were at $430 per capita. And I have to admit that 11 years has put us behind the 8 ball, so to speak, when it comes to expanding our services or doing anything within it. The master membership agreement has given us a type of COLA increase only, which is 2 to 3% per year. For your further ones coming from 2023, 2022, and into 2024 is all going to be between a 2 and 3% increase. This will continue until we're close to where we need to be, and that is going to be, well, if it comes to this, in 50 years we'll be where we should be right now. And so, again, that's one of the limitations of the master membership agreement. If we open it up, everything within it will be subject to discussion and change if necessary. And I don't know about you guys and 7 of you on council, but we have 54 member municipalities. Imagine trying to herd that cats. So again, for the foreseeable future, you guys can bank on getting a 3% increase, 2 to 3% increase per year. Next slide.
All right, so on this slide, there's some numbers about the levy that Stony Plain Public Library pays to Yellowhead Regional Library and some of the return on investment that you've received. In 2022, the levy population was 18,762, and Stony Plain staff took the Homelessness Academy. This is one example of training that we provided to you. And they took it on February 6, 2023, and that number will be reflected in the 2023 return on investment. This is quite an expensive course that's offered by a social worker out of Seattle Public Library, and we were able to offer it to all of our members who are in a more, well, all of our members, but those of us in a more urban environment have really benefited from that training in terms of what we're seeing in social issues right now. Stony Plain citizens have access to a lot of resources because of their involvement in TRAC, and as Yellowhead is one of the original members of the Regional Automation Society, which formed in the late 90s, YRL is proud to be part of a long-standing consortium that provides library software for your libraries. So the software we use is shared among three other regions in the province, and we're able to avoid a large expense because of that. We partner with Marigold Peace and Northern Lights Library to provide that software and to share our physical and digital collections. So all the ebooks and physical books, e-audio, all of that is shared between these 4 regions. The computer network infrastructure that underpins these resources and your library's in-house networks is provided through the provincial SuperNet, and the Wi-Fi and other technological services come through the Yellowhead region to your library.
Well, I guess that brings us to the end of this one. We are open for questions from council at this moment, and yeah, we hope that our library brings you guys the world.
Definitely thank you for your presentation, and definitely appreciate receiving kind of the return on investment and what our residents are getting in terms of our involvement and membership into the Yellowhead Regional Library. Members of council, any questions for clarity and understanding? Councillor Hanser, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll ask the question of the proper library entity here this evening. In your budget work, you present a terminology that I'm not familiar with. What is cost avoidance?
Well, I'll let Wendy take this one, and then I'll fill in at the end if I need to. Go ahead, Wendy.
I'm always turning it on or off. So the idea is if you were on your own and you wanted to access these same type of services, so for example, buying the e-resources that you have access to, such as downloadable audio books or e-services or the Wi-Fi connections or even the books that you interlibrary loan from the other libraries, all of that has been given a cost, a price, and then that's been added all together. So if you were going to provide exactly the same kind of services, this is what it would cost you.
So by people downloading, Your Worship, through you, to the YRL representatives. So when you use the term cost avoidance, you mean the people using YRL services are avoiding having to pay for something
Yes.
that they normally would pay for if they were acting as individuals.
Or the library would have to pay for if the library itself wanted to offer those services.
So it's an acronym for savings.
Exactly. Yeah, we could say cost savings, exactly.
Usually on the bottom, I don't know if it's true for this town, but on the bottom of your receipts you get from the library, there's also a cost avoidance number underneath that YRL puts together. And that's a good way to show it as well. So have a look if you ever do take any material out of the library, and you'll see, you'll come up with a number on the bottom of your receipt of what you saved for doing this.
Thank you, Your Worship. Savings makes more sense to me.
Yes. Any other questions for clear understanding? Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for being here with us. As a school teacher, libraries are very important, and so certainly my students access local libraries and certainly some of the services that YRL provides. You had some information on a slide that we didn't have on our slide, so if you can just jump back, I believe it was the levies slide. For me. Yep, there we are. Just looking for a little bit of clarity as to why we're looking at a per capita proposed levy increase, but then the justification for returning some of the levy that you do collect to the local library for purchasing library materials.
Geez, you caught me. I thought I could slide that one by you, but no. That's easily explained, but I will let Wendy explain that one as well.
Yeah, so it's just been set up that way. We could say we're not going to provide any money to the people to have an allotment, a materials allotment. But one of the initial reasons for doing it was to make sure that then we could judge how much staff time we would need for the books that would come in through our system. So if we just said to a library, okay, we're not going to give you any money or hold money here for you, we don't know how much they're going to use us. But so somebody goes out and buys $30,000 worth of books, but we only have maybe 0.5 FTE to deal with that. So from the beginning in 1971, this has always existed. It has floated occasionally on times to be much more than that, and now it's down to this 75 cents, if that makes sense.
I do want to add to this, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Anderson, and that is because YRL is so big, we represent nearly 320,000 people in our region alone. The buying power of YRL when it comes to a book that you could probably get at Chapters, if you're a teacher with a 20% discount, we can get YRL to purchase that even further discounted. So again, your money will go farther. Okay, this is initially put on because there's lots of smaller libraries within our region, and their spending allotment when it comes to materials is very limited. If we did not do this, some of them would not be able to purchase their material for that year. And so it's a kind of a two-edged sword there. We get it cheaper if they process it, and it's part of what you guys as councillors pay us for. Why not get us to do it? And it gives cost savings at your library side for less people needed to manage the desk, less people to write what did I say, book reviews or book, what do they call those things? Bib?
Bid records.
Yeah, bib records, there you go, and stuff like that, so, okay?
Thank you. Anything else, Councilor Anderson?
Yeah, I need to sit on that one for a second. We provided allotment to our local library as well, and so, it almost feels like we're putting money here, so it's coming back over here anyway, and so I can appreciate, the economy of scale, being able to leverage what, the YRL brings to the table, and so with what you've shared, if our library is taking some of the allotment that's provided through the municipality to buy more materials, are they still able to tap into the cost savings that you've alluded to this evening?
Absolutely. And this actually was a problem at my hometown, which is Hinton, Alberta. We actually asked YRL to do a review of our purchasing, because a lot of the purchasing we did out there was through Chapters Indigo. And then, of course, they came up with, we would actually have an additional 70% savings because of this. And so we mandated it within policy that they would have to check with YRL first to see if they could get the material from them before going to an alternate Chapters or wherever to get it. And so with that kind of cost savings, we want to make sure that the taxpayers get their money's worth, put it that way.
Perfect, thank you for that. One just final question here, picking up on what Councillor Hansard had asked about cost avoidance, but just looking specifically, from what I can gather, it's about half of YRL's overall budget, is that 1.8 that's here. So I'm going to assume then that that's total available materials to our residents, not the value of the materials that were accessed by our library or residents to Stony Plain, is that correct?
Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor Anderson, sorry. I'm going to let Wendy answer that question.
Can you just repeat the question so I've got it clear in my head?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was taking a peek at YRL's overall expenditures. We're looking at 3.6, I think, million listed on your website, or 3.8 is your overall budget for the year. So the 1.8 is pretty close to half of your overall budget. And so the question was just, from what I'm gathering from that, is that the 1.8 million or 1.88 that's listed here is the value that's provided to the municipality if all of those resources were accessed, not specific to the resources that have been accessed, if that makes so. Sorry, Mr. Smith, you had mentioned at the bottom of the list, or at the bottom of a receipt, it'll say the amount cost avoided for that particular resource. We're not tallying up that amount and saying 1.8 million. We're saying the collection offered by YRL has a value of 1.8, and that's what we're tapping into in terms of the return on investment outlined here.
It does have actual physical numbers attached to it. So if we're saying 1.8, it's saying your residents borrowed, 1,000 ebooks this year. That costs this much. So that's plugged in there. Ebooks are very expensive for a public library. It's not like Kindle. They're often $150 a shot for an audiobook or whatever, and they're timed sequences. So this is based on physical numbers that just the Stony Plain residents used. And that's it, and it talks about like the consultation visits. How much would that have been if you had to go out and hire somebody for that and everything? So yeah, it is specific to Stony Plain based on quite elaborate data tables that are at the office. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you so much.
Okay, good, thank you. And then just for some clarity for Councillor Hansard and myself, is the cost avoidance is, that number is based on our actual usage of programs, resources, borrowing, intermunicipal borrowing. So that number would be different for the city of Spruce Grove or different for the town in Hinton. That cost avoidance is a different number for each municipality.
It is, yes.
Thank you. Councilor Laurie, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much for the presentation. I found it quite interesting, and I've actually delved a little deeper on your website and looking at your draft 23 budget and the 2022 audited financial statements. And I just have a question in regards to the operating contingency reserve. So I noticed at the end of 2022 in your audited financial statements, your operating contingency balance is currently just over $2 million. I'm just wondering if the Yellowhead Regional Library has a specific policy in place in regards to the operating contingency reserve and what the anticipated or prescribed balance of that reserve is to be on that policy.
So when we were talking with our auditors, who happen to be Grant Thornton, and they work with nonprofits, they said for someone to be able to have the actual funds in the bank account to cover your, an operational contingency is quite unusual. But they did say to us, you want to have at least a year to 18 months operational contingency fund in case you have to shut down operations. So that's basically, or if there was something unusual, like the province didn't come forward with their operating grant in time and we had to move money. One of the things that has been part of our budget process, though, is to work at not, even we feel that they're a little high. And so we want to draw down some of those reserves. So we've been trying to put forward in the last year and this year budgets that are in deficit so we can pull from those reserves a little bit, because there is no policy on the amount, because we've been told by the auditors, well, you'll just be changing policy all the time because costs change. So instead, look at your monthly costs and keep a year to 18 months worth and then go down from there. So that's what we've been working towards as well. We have very healthy reserves. They were built up over a certain amount of time when our staffing was a lot smaller. Pat would remember this. Our staff contingency was a lot smaller, and we didn't provide as many services, and we have now been trying to up that service level, and so that's where we've been trying to build in get some balance there.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. And yeah, I mean, that year to 18 months, I mean, you're talking, I think it's about a $3.5 million operating line. You're talking as much as $5.25 million. And that sounds, as you said, very high. Even the $2 million was very high, especially given that we are seeing that increase in there. So I appreciate the answer, and I appreciate that that's something that YRL is cognizant of and is working towards the best strategy around those. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to ask a question not based on what you showed us, but what you mentioned when you first sat down at the beginning of your presentation, that there are 3 to 4 libraries that are currently struggling with director retention. Is there a reason that we are finding that the YRL area is struggling so much with that?
There's something in the water? No, Wendy can talk to this.
Yeah, and I think Lena may have a few points. I think what's happening is we've seen long-term retirements of people who knew the jobs inside and out, and then to bring somebody in and say, now these are the things that you need to deal with. For example, homelessness. Homelessness, when I started library school, was never this huge issue. And now we're asking staff to deal with this component of a public that's served, so definitely have a right to come into the library, but this wasn't something that I recognized at the time. Or some of these other kinds of social issues, I think, in part. And then I just think we're seeing this huge turnover because of maybe COVID. People have said, okay, I'm retiring, I'm done, and we don't have, because you didn't have to hire, you don't have those people with experience that can come in and deal with it. So it's more difficult.
Anything else?
So with that being said, then, would the expectations of our directors be too high and we're asking too much of them, and instead of it being a one-person job, it should actually be a two-person job?
I think that's often, you need backup. We don't have those same kind of issues because we deal directly with our members, but, who are all lovely. But even you can see what has happened today. Carla would have been here. If I wasn't around, it would have been a lot more difficult for necessarily Hank to come in and just do the presentation, or even some of these questions would be more difficult if he didn't have the background. So to have a good deputy director and director, or however you want to work that out, it's worth it, and especially a larger center.
Well, to add to this, it's also not just library managers, it's also trustees that want to sit on your library board. You do have a good plethora of people here now, but again, there's such a big turnover into it. Also, COVID had a little bit to do with it because people were within their own minds, and now they have to be back open again, and some of those ideas that they were festering within are the ones that, you know, don't really sit well within, say, the Libraries Act or the regulations that we have to follow, as well as with you guys with the MGA, right? So, again, coming back from this, yeah, I'm seeing a big turnover, as well in trustees as well, so.
Thank you.
Any more questions or comments? Councillor Hansard?
Thank you, Your Worship. You mentioned at the end of your presentation about having to draw out of reserves. Is it considered standard practice with YRL that you would pull out of reserves to fund operational expenses?
To this point, we have never, in the 9 years that I've been with YRL, ever pulled out from reserves. Last year was supposed to be the first time that they did it, but some strange fluke, I think that was, Wendy, that they ended up.
We did very good on interest in GICs.
Okay, and so we didn't. So we're trying this because, again, we have to pull. Right now, we're 11 years behind because between 2008 and 2019, we never did raise our request from each individual member municipality. And so we are already behind the 8 ball. So the way that we're doing this is we're taking 2 to 3% per year, and then hopefully reducing our operations contingency reserve so that we can be more in line. And that's the way that we kind of molded it together so that we don't have to open up the master membership agreement.
Okay, one more question, Your Worship. Along these lines, I guess I'm wondering why, to discuss this piece around the participation of the member municipalities and what it costs them per capita to be able to operate YRL. Why does opening that for discussion have to affect the entire master agreement for all of your however many members? It seems to me that that piece ought to be able to be discussed because of the rise and fall of the costs of running a library. We seldom see costs come down, but in all honesty, if you're having a particularly good year and the economy straightens out and there ends up being some savings in the future, just like we all hope that's true of groceries, that once we get past the madness, the cost of milk and bread will come down at the grocery store. Maybe we're dreaming, but it seems to me that we ought to be able to discuss that without having to put the entire master agreement on the table to be dissected, picked apart, agreed upon, or disagreed upon. So is it the Libraries Act that mandates that? Is it just this agreement that you've got with all these municipalities? And could that it not be proposed that this piece be able to be discussed?
In essence, Mr. Mayor, through to Councilor Hansard, opening the master membership agreement would mean that more money would have to come from the member municipalities to use our services. And, you know, we've had some healthy reserves. Councillor Mayor knows of these reserves and knows what it's like doing a budget presentation and coming up with these numbers. We have a healthy, how can I say, overage or what's going into reserves the following year. A definite discussion will be made at an executive as well as board level to see if those rates need to go down. But again, I don't know about you, I live in Hinton. Right now, fuel is about 147. You guys are lucky here at 125, I saw. But again, when that's going to end. And so costs do rise. Inflation is something that we need to take into account. If there is a need and we have no reserves and we need to go to our municipalities, we will open the master membership agreement if we have to do so. Okay, but as of right now, with the balance that we have, I think it's prudent for us to follow the balancing act that with our reserve status to use some of that up to further us up the road.
Okay.
Thank you, and I appreciate that, and I think a question was well asked by Councillor Hanson and also Councillor Laurie in terms of, you know, what is an adequate reserve holdings, and I think that was addressed by saying instead of raising the per capita, for example, to 484 next year, they've decided to propose it to 464 and then use some of the contingency reserve that has been built up. So it's kind of like softening the blow so that it's not the huge impact all at once until that reserve gets to a number that that the YRL board is comfortable with in terms of holding within their budget.
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hansard and to everyone, I guess, on council, yes, that's something we can look into. Again, the budget process for this following year is basically nearly set. Okay, it probably would not be able to make it into the 2024 as far as I'm concerned because we have one more vote and that's the board. I believe in December votes that through. Okay, because the executive has already pushed it forward. So again, I could tell you that this is something that will be on Mr. Mayor's agenda for next year, and he will definitely bring this forward. I could guarantee that.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, members of council? Councillor Laurie, go ahead.
Well, there was one more question. The previous, Ms. Hansard, you actually asked the previous delegation why they needed to come in front every year to do their budget presentation if there's no change. It's actually written within the Alberta Libraries Act that they need to do this. And so even if there is no change, you should expect the library to be in front of you at least once a year.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through you, just a quick question. You mentioned the master agreement, and so I pulled it up here and I was kind of looking at it, and I just have a question regarding membership. You talked about in your presentation that there's municipalities and school divisions that are eligible to be members in the master agreement. Looking at the master agreement, you've got 80% or 87% of eligible municipalities, 53 of 61 that are participating in the agreement, but there's only 30% of the school divisions, 3 out of 10. Can you just elaborate on why so few of the school divisions choose to participate in the YRL versus municipalities?
Yeah, so back in, was it 1996, 98, when the school divisions and counties were changed, it used to be one tax body. When the school divisions came to YRL to join, only the 3, this is before my time. I think there were 5 school divisions. And then they slowly started to drop off, and so we only have 3. Part of the reason is we don't get any funding. We get an operating grant for all the municipalities and the per capita from Public Library Services branch through municipal affairs. The adult education or education, whoever it is in the province, that ministry does not give the schools or school divisions any funds to join a regional library or to be a part of it. So they are paying a higher per capita rate. And then with just school costs, I believe They just don't see the value of it because they don't even see, this is going to sound quite biased, the value of having maybe a teacher librarian in the school or even having a library anymore. And so we have 3 members that have stayed on quite a lot. We do consultation with them, but there has to be a desire of the school division to have us there, and there also needs to be, it's sort of site-based funding as well, so each principal can decide, okay, I'm going to have people that will work in the library or be a part of the library. If we have no one to work with in the library, because there isn't a teaching assistant who can take on that role or be there, even though we provide the service, nobody uses it. So it's sad, and we've done our best. We go out and make presentations to school divisions if asked, but we recently were in Grand Yellowhead at one of their meetings, and they don't see, at this point, a value for the libraries. They call them LRCs, and they say we don't really need the books and stuff, so I don't know.
There's a demise in the province of libraries within schools, which is quite sad to see, okay? A lot of them, even the program at the U of A, they've asked us if it's even viable to offer a school-based library type of diploma or something to it, but the writing's on the wall. I don't know, Mr. Laurie, if even your school has a library, if it's just a learning commons now.
Excellent, thank you. And part of the reason that I did ask that is actually we just had the new school constructed here, Westview School, and they have a very unique library. Their library is actually now larger than what it was in their older school. It's kind of the central hub of the school. It's a fantastic school library. And when I looked at the cost avoidance and kind of how that all plays in, I'm very surprised to hear that. And I'd be curious as time goes on if we get some more feedback as to any potential advocacy we can do in regards to funding changes at the provincial level or anything that could, because the whole point of this obviously is to have a centralized resource and to work together to provide the best library services. Mm-hmm. And so if we're going to have libraries in our school, it only seems to make sense that those libraries in the school would be tied into the same organizations as our local library to provide the best service to all of the users of the libraries. The last question I have on that is, as part of the school divisions, I know to the west of us there are some Francophone schools. We now have a Francophone school in our municipality, and I don't see the Francophone school division listed under the Yellowhead Regional Library as an eligible school division. Is that for a specific reason, or are they not eligible just because they haven't been added to the master service agreement?
I would say the latter. Yeah, it's just an oversight in the sense of they probably weren't around when the agreement was created, and we haven't updated the schedule.
So thank you. So maybe there's an opportunity there for the YRL to do a presentation to the Francophone School Division. As I know, the current school is using one of their classrooms as a library, but they are exceeding enrollment expectations, and space is becoming very challenging already for them, which is a good problem to have as a starter school. But again, being connected into this type of a service, I think would be of great benefit to them. So appreciate the presentation and all the information. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for all the questions and comments. Any other questions and comments to the presenters? Councilor Meyer, go ahead.
I'd just like to highlight your guys' efforts in helping our library board with advocacy. I think that was, as you said it, you thought key to the province increasing funds to the library, but I don't think we would have even attempted that type of advocacy ourselves without some guidance. And just so the rest of council is aware, we did have 2 of the candidates come and make presentations to our library board. And like I say, armed with the advocacy materials from the YRL, we hit them hard. And I don't know, I like to jump in on there and say we got some money there too.
Definitely, advocacy is important. Just to tell you that YRL is on the leading edge of advocacy right now. During the last election period, which was just a few months ago, all 7 regions came together, and that's probably what happened to get the increase within libraries, was came together to make letters and to design letters with everyone's logo on the letterhead, everyone signing it that was within it. And so that was a challenge to do. All 7 regions together, but again, when it came to anything happening within the media, we also tried to tailor our message into a positive light, which was very helpful. We did get some requests from CBC, but again, those ones were done within a good reason. So when everyone's on the same page and wants to drive libraries further, it's good to know that the advocacy part is there to help you guys out. Because as of right now, I have to agree with Eric too. A lot of the responsibilities for libraries falls within the municipalities, and more happen all the time. And so it's skewed. Most libraries, 85% of their budget comes from the municipality, and 15% only from a public library services branch of municipal affairs. And so we are hoping and continuing this purpose advocacy to make that a more balanced equation.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? No? Definitely on behalf of our community and our library board, thank you for being here, and definitely I think from what I understand from the reports from Councillor Meyer is that the YRL is very beneficial and useful for the town of Stony Plain, and appreciate that the return on investment for our community, as well know that there's kind of savings, economies of scale. I think I was mentioned here that as long as we can work together, I think if the town of Stony Plain was purchasing equipment or materials for roughly 18,000 people, our cost would be considerably higher versus YRL purchasing stuff for 370,000 people, which does have a big impact on the purchase price that we can attain. I do have a question in terms of the membership levy. So is there anything added to that levy besides just the per capita?
Well, your levy for us is just the per capita amount that's listed there. We do at YRL get some of our funding straight from municipal affairs as well. Okay, but there's a balance to that as well. That's normally for administrative purposes only, as well. So the levy that you guys pay within us runs the programs that we offer for you. Does that make sense?
Yes. So in terms of the presentation, the membership levy for Town of Stony Plain was $83,679. Is that 2023 or 2024?
It's a page back.
Page 12 on your report, and then page 48 on council's agenda package.
That's $83,679 is your membership levy. That's correct.
For 2023.
For 2023, I believe it is, isn't it?
I'm going to ask if this is based on the 2022, because this is a report on the ROI.
Yes.
So it's probably a little bit more than that, but I'm positive, because this is relating to 2022 levy rates, which would have been, like it was 18,762, and then that would be at 446 per capita, and this year you would have paid whatever the per capita number was at 454.
I think that document is actually within one of the documents you may have in your package already, isn't it? Because normally, when we do send out documentation, doesn't it have what everyone pays within it?
It does in the budget, but I don't know if that was part of this.
If you would like that
We can send it
we
to
could
you.
send it to you as well.
Yeah, the budget was sent out sometimes toward the end of September, the budget proposal. So it would show this year's, next year's, and I think the projections up to 2026, I believe.
Okay, no, appreciate that clarity. Then my next question is, in terms of per capita, what census data is the YRL using?
Well, good question. This is an excellent question. So you know that municipal affairs capped the official populations lists at 2019 rates. They then told us that we were to go to the estimates, population estimates from Treasury Board. So every January, Treasury Board announces what those population estimates are, and that's what we use. This was based on the advice of a lawyer to follow through with that, as well as consultation within the board last year about, Eric was in that, weren't you, in that? Oh, I'm going to say you were. Weren't you on that ad hoc committee one? Anyways, yeah, so that's the estimates, and they're called Treasury Board Estimate Population Estimates, and there's census populations there that we use.
Okay, I'll have to do some little more follow-up on that, because if those membership levies are based on 2022 numbers, based on a 4.46 per capita, based on the 2021 federal census, the population of Stony Plain is 17,993, which equates to a levy of $80,000 and $248, not $83,000. So I'm just having a concern about the membership. That's why I asked about the levy, and if it was just per capita, then I want to know which numbers we're using. And if the estimates by Alberta Treasury is wrong, then maybe there has to be a different scenario of how that's used. Because even at 4.64 per capita, as proposed for 2024, if our population is used as the last federal census, which is 2021, our contribution is 82,000 and change, so not 83.
Yeah,
So
no,
I'm
it's
trying to figure that
higher,
out.
it's higher on those population estimates from Treasury Board, yeah. And it is in our documents. I can send them, I can make sure they're sent to you tomorrow with we list all the populations and where it came from. But we are using Treasury Board estimates, we're not using the census data.
Okay, well, that's good to know, because my next conversation with the municipal affairs is that for provincial funding, I want to use my estimates of my growth rate at 30,000 people and not 18,000 people. I'll see how that flies.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Councillor Plechko.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just Googling quickly, population for Stony Plain estimated through the Treasury Board was 18,567 for 2022.
Yep. And that's interesting that when they fund us, it is the actual numbers, not the projected numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they fund on 2019 population estimates. I will not speak for them, but it's true. It's a really interesting conundrum.
Guess who makes up the difference? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for pointing that out, because that's definitely something that we need to review, because the provincial government is funding us on actual numbers, and then they're asking us as municipalities to fund on projected numbers.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
You're not the only council we've come to that actually has that same issue. All of them do. And yes, it's nothing we can do about it. We charge for the population that is actually there. And I'm sorry that their funding for is always behind a few years. We were lucky because through advocacy, we were using 2016 numbers until this last year. We were happy to get closer to 2019, which actually increases it quite substantially. But again, advocacy works in mysterious ways, and we're going to ask for actual or projected ones as well. And one of the things that that they did not do, we had a 4-point plan. 3 points were good, but the fourth one was to give us an increase year after year so that we do not have to fight with them all the time to get 3% or 2%. And again, that did not fly, but I guess everyone here with their stone faces show that that's part and parcel with our provincial government, yes.
Okay, thank you for your presentation, and thank you for answering the questions that council members had. Definitely appreciate the work that the WIRE is doing, and just by seeing the cost avoidance that our community has to not pay for is a benefit for all residents within our area and also the whole tri-region. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so council members, so moving on to number 5 of our agenda is statutory public hearings. We have nothing scheduled tonight, so we'll move on to number 6, which is the adoption of council minutes for the RCM of September 25th. Councilor Pletchko, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council approved the September 25th, 2023 regular council meeting minutes as presented.
Okay, thank you. Members of council, you had the opportunity to read them. Any errors, omissions, or questions regarding those minutes? Okay, I didn't see any either, so I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Moving on to number 7, which is council boards and committee minutes. Councilor Hansard, please.
Your Worship, I move that Town Council receive the board and committee meeting minutes for information.
Okay, thank you. Members of council, the opportunity to review them. Any questions, comments regarding the TLC or the Growth and Commerce Committee? Councilor Laurie?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Hansard as our representative on the Tri-Leisure Centre. I noticed in the last motion on the minutes, which appears on page 62 of the package, there's a term used here. It says Michelle Thibault-Grunty moved, the board of directors approves the collective bargaining mandate as presented. Can you explain the mandate that's being spoken here? Was this the acceptance of the collective bargaining agreement, or was this direction to administration on negotiations?
I believe it was direction regarding negotiations. It's the wording of the motion that was put in front of us. She did not create the wording herself.
Okay, I think the question was, the wording's there. We just want, I think Councilor Laurie is asking, was that a direction to administration to negotiate parameters, or was that an acceptance of the parameters that was already agreed upon by administration?
I believe it was acceptance of the parameters. But I can verify that. We don't have a full board meeting tomorrow, but I can get the information.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Laurie, if you can send an email to council, and then Councilor Hansard will forward on to TLC.
Thank you, and I'll just follow up, and maybe administration can assist with this then. If there is collective bargaining, I'm just curious if that is complete, or if that was completed before we received the TLC budget, and if that bargaining was then reflected in there, or is that something that is yet to come, and if so, will that impact at all the 2024 budget request from the Tri-Leisure Centre?
Your Worship, excuse me, Your Worship, through to Councilor Laurie. I can get that confirmation from Mr. Richer. I assumed the numbers that were put before us were board approved, so I would assume that that bargaining was known and those numbers were collected as part of that. So, but I can definitely get that confirmation from Mr. Richer and send it back out to council.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead. Anything else?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, comments regarding those two board and committee minutes? Okay, see none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that is. Okay, and let's take a 10-minute recess, and we'll come back to number 8 of our agenda. Thank you. Okay. Welcome back, members of council, and to our staff, and to the members that are in the gallery, and the ones that are participating and watching online. Back to our agenda, number 8, which is the traffic bylaw update. Administration, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. So this evening, we have an amended traffic bylaw for second and third reading in front of council. As council is aware, on August 28th, we brought this bylaw, particular bylaw, to council. At that meeting, we had a robust conversation about micromobility or e-scooters or e-devices in our community, and there was some conversation about studded tires and the clause around cleats. So administration took the document back. We did quite a bit of research on how best to define e-vehicles in Stony Plain to capture it in this particular bylaw to ensure that we were able to enforce and to ensure that it was part of legislation. So we did add some clarification around definitions for mobility aids and pedestrians and also mobility devices. We did update section 3.2.0, and that specifically addresses the behavior of people while they're actually using and riding these devices that are defined within the bylaw. We did move the cleat and lug section, tracked vehicles to the commercial vehicle because that's where it is the best place for it to be. And we did update some language to provide some clarity throughout the document. In addition to that, at the Alberta Municipalities Conference, which was a few weeks ago, there was a resolution related to e-bikes and e-scooters particularly. City of Edmonton and City of Calgary both authored that. And at the convention, the resolution was adopted for a change to the Alberta Traffic Act for inclusions and provisions around these particular types of vehicles and how we can, as municipalities, create bylaws to put some rules around the use of them in our municipalities. Not many changes to the first reading bylaw that council did see. Both myself and the CPO supervisor, Tiffany Anderson, are here to answer any technical questions that council may have as a result of the amendments before you this evening for second and third reading.
Good. Thank you for that update, and thank you for making those changes that were addressed during first reading. Members of council, questions, comments, and about the presentation. Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for bringing this back. It's nice to see some of the clarity and certainly some of the questions around e-bikes addressed. I do have a follow-up question, though, related to micro-mobility devices. And I'm going to jump between two pages, page 73, where we have our definitions of micro-mobility devices, and then page 84 of our agenda package, where some of the specific bylaws are. So just under, oh, sorry, I lost my page here. Just want to make sure we back up far enough. The definition of micromobility devices does include bikes, e-bikes, and electric scooters. In the preamble or in the lead sheet to this particular discussion, there was comments about how e-scooters still are not permitted under the Alberta Traffic Safety Act. When I go down to 84, it talks about micromobility devices just as a general term that's already been defined. Again, that definition includes e-scooters. So maybe just looking for some clarity there. Based on the way that our bylaw is written before us, does that permit e-scooters, or does the legislation and the Alberta Traffic Safety Act precede that? And would they still be ineligible to be on our pathways in the community?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Anderson, thank you for the question. We included the e-scooters in the micromobility devices definition in anticipation if the legislation were to change. In addition to that, we were trying to address the behavior of which micromobility devices are being used, not the specific equipment that they are being used.
Follow up?
Yeah, if I could please, sorry. So just looking at our lead sheet, so page 69, It talked about the town needing to engage in pilot projects to permit e-scooters to the bylaw. This is under the list. There's one or two sentences, and then that next paragraph there right towards the end of the paragraph. So the way that the bylaw is written, to me, it looks like we would be creating a bylaw that would permit e-scooters to be utilized within the municipality. But they are listed here under not permitted under the Traffic Safety Act. And so, sorry, just for clarity, based on the amendments that were made here, are e-scooters permitted on our sidewalks and walkways?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Anderson, the definition that we have is based on speed also. I believe the scooters so the ones that are not included in the Traffic Safety Act, which I think we see the Lime scooters, those types of scooters, I don't believe that they would be captured within that speed, is how we're interpreting that particular e-scooter definition in terms of the commercial scooters have a higher rate of speed versus the personally purchased scooters. That's how we're, how we're interpreting that in terms of how the definition has been written in the bylaw.
Okay, so from my understanding of what was just said, then in terms of the pilot projects in the city of Spruce Grove, for example, had the opportunity to ride one of those scooters. They go up to, I think, 43 kilometers an hour. So that would be illegal in town Stony Plain. But if somebody purchased an e-scooter that allowed them to get around the community, if it's under 25 kilometers an hour, then it's legal.
Your Worship, based on the definition that is included within the bylaw, that your interpretation is correct.
Okay, thank you. And if council would like to do something in the future for a pilot project, then that'll be another addition or a separate bylaw to enhance this.
Your Worship, just to clarify, it perhaps could result in that, or the Traffic Safety Act, or any amendment to the Traffic Safety Act that might relate to scooters or electric vehicles would provide more clarity or definition around those particular devices, which our officers have the ability to enforce the Traffic Safety Act, and we do reference the Traffic Safety Act within this traffic bylaw. So the rules that may be amended or altered or adjusted from a provincial government related to e-vehicles would then hold true within this bylaw. If amendments were made to the traffic bylaw where ours was in contravention or we had to make some adjustments, then certainly we would bring the bylaw back to council to ensure that whatever new amendments were in place were captured or in alignment with our current bylaw.
Councillor Anderson?
Okay, so, sorry. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I'm just gonna very simply, I hope. So what I've understood is that scooters purchased for personal use, as long as they fit within the micromobility definition, which I think in the proposed bylaw is up to 45 kilometers an hour, which is on page 73, I believe, under the definition there, would be permitted, but what's not permitted then is anything over 45 kilometers an hour or devices that are being used for commercial purposes in terms of the Lime or e-scooter sort of rental programs that are we might see in Spruce Grove.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Anderson. Currently, under the provincial legislation, and this is what the resolution speaks to at the convention that happened a few weeks ago, currently personal use scooters are not permitted in Alberta. This is a gap in the legislation that has been identified by numerous municipalities. That being said, people are still able to purchase them. So we are trying to control how they use them. In addition to that, when they are operating the scooter, they have the ability to use them manually, from what I understand. So from an enforcement perspective, it's a little bit challenging for us to articulate or to identify when they're using them manually versus when they're using them electronically, because when we arrive, they will be using them likely only as manual. If Spruce Grove, or if the town of Stony Plain were to enter into a pilot project, then the public use or shared use scooters would then be legal because they would be operating them under a pilot project. Does that help provide clarification?
Sorry, I'm going to try one more time. I see Councillor Laurie's hand up. So I'm looking, page 69. It says some regional municipalities have included permissive language in their bylaws related to the use of e-scooters. Based on the bylaw before us, are we one of those municipalities that now has permissive language that allows the use of e-scooters?
Your Worship, I can see the confusion here. 100% can see the confusion. And perhaps I can make a suggestion. In the clause, micromobility device, which is 2.2.0, which is captured on page 73 of our agenda package, it does say that e-scooters are a part of micromobility devices. However, the Traffic Safety Act clearly states that e-scooters are not permitted. Personal e-scooters, the clarity that you're seeking with the City of Spruce Grove is that's a shared scooter system, and they're permitted to be on public roadways and public property because it's a pilot project, and they've been given that authority through the provincial government. We would not be able to provide authority and give permission for anyone to ride an e-scooter at this time until such legislation changed, or we were entering into our pilot project for shared use only. So we're not prepared to do that, and that's not before you this evening. So perhaps the cleanest way is to strike e-scooter off of that definition.
And that makes sense. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Laurie, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. And actually, I'm a little concerned about that last comment I heard about striking it off. So further to your comment, and looking at the information that's available from the City of Spruce Grove, those scooters are actually capped at 24 kilometers an hour. So they don't go 40 some odd kilometers an hour. So looking at the bylaw that's been put in front of us today, we're looking at that 25 kilometer an hour cap. The program that's currently running in the City of Spruce Grove with the bird scooters would comply with that. The secondary is exactly what Councillor Anderson was talking about and the General Manager was talking about, is that Bird, Lime, all of those companies, they have actually been permitted a special exemption. They have applied for and received a special exemption from the province of Alberta to the Alberta Traffic Safety Act. So because they have applied and received that exemption, those scooters are allowed under the Alberta Traffic and Safety Act through these programs as they work through the municipalities, whereas personal owned ones are not allowed because an individual does not have an exemption from the Alberta Traffic and Safety Act. So I would not be supportive of actually striking the e-scooters from the traffic bylaws that's been presented, because particularly given that Spruce Grove is undergoing the pilot, we are looking at, or we're in the middle of constructing 2 trail connections between our communities. I feel that a hypothetical and likely next step within, let's call it a 12-month period, would be that we could be included in that pilot. And that's not an issue that council is necessarily discussing tonight. However, if we were to strike e-scooters at this point in time, that means in order to participate in the pilot, we then have to reopen this bylaw again. So with the bylaw currently open, the legislation under the Alberta Traffic and Safety Act still applies. The e-scooters are not allowed under the Alberta Traffic Safety Act. If that changes based on the resolutions that were passed at AM, great. We don't have to open our bylaw again for that to be allowed. If we choose to participate in a pilot program sometime in the next 12 months, again, great. Our bylaw does not have to be open again. But if we strike e-scooters out of the bylaw after having all the changes that we requested at the last meeting be put into this bylaw, that then puts us back to square one, where if this is something that we want to consider, or if the provincial government does change their language in the Alberta Traffic Safety Act, now we are required to redo a bunch of work that we've essentially already just done. The way that I see it right now, and administration can correct me if I'm wrong, even though e-scooters are mentioned in our bylaw, that does not make them legal to use. It is the Alberta Traffic Safety Act that defines whether they are legal to use or not, and currently the only way they're legal to use is the companies who have applied for and received that exemption. Would that be a correct understanding of e-scooters and their legal position within the municipalities?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Laurie. Yeah, this is a confusing topic, and this is, we spent a bit of time on it during first reading. Certainly, your theory of it being included, it's not included in the Traffic Safety Act, it could survive an amendment, and we don't have to bring the bylaw back to council for a revision. However, that does provide a bit of a confusion to the general public also in terms of if something's not permitted, but our bylaw says it is permitted, but technically we can't lower the standard of the Traffic Safety Act, which this would be lowering the standard of the Traffic Safety Act in a sense. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Supervisor Anderson, but I think we'd be lowering the standard because they're not permitted in the Traffic Safety Act. And what you described with the Lime scooters is the amendment or what the province is saying, you are permitted to have these legally on public roadways. Scooters can be ridden in the community right now on your private property, so in your driveway, or if you have a country residential lot, you can have them out there quite legally under the Traffic Safety Act right now. I would look to the CAO for some guidance on this perhaps, but leaving it in or taking it out, I think there's some confusion with the public. I think if we leave it in, the Traffic Safety Act will probably supersede what's written in our bylaw, and we'd have to follow that one correctly. But if an amendment happened, then our bylaw is well positioned to react to that particular amendment, assuming they do amend it to include e-scooters, which I would assume they might, and I think it's something that we've been hearing is the direction they are potentially going to take. We would certainly be positioned with not bringing this bylaw back to council for a further revision.
Councillor Anderson, clear as mud. Come back to it.
I could certainly appreciate Councillor Laurie's, point. I think, obviously I had some confusion and had to ask about 4 different questions to make sure that I had clarity as to what the bylaw was speaking to. And so, I certainly appreciate that perspective of taking it out and not and whatnot. I will be prepared when it comes time to debate, I guess. I think we're still in the question period, but to bring forward a motion to strike it out based on the conversation that's been had this evening.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hanstrom.
Okay, Your Worship. I appreciate that we're trying to be preemptive, proactive. That's probably the last positive thing I'll say about this. Tonight alone, I've heard the word confusion or confusing 6 times. And I appreciate that people don't have all the answers. I also have heard it's a challenge. There are challenges around this. I hear our chief peace officer say, we're trying to control the users. Well, aren't we all trying to control users of everything? But, that makes sort of sense. But once we put them out there or allow them to be out there, we don't always have a way to control those users unless they're going to have a license of some kind. I hear we're talking about shared use only, meaning somebody would have to be having a company where the scooters are meant not to belong to any one individual or family, but that they would be shared among all town residents, including those who may or may not be above age or, below a certain age. This is my concern. What is the town's liability? Should someone become injured? A rider or someone who gets hurt by a rider? I also know that people do not, in the city of Spruce Grove, do not appreciate one bit random scooters being left on their yard until somebody comes and picks them up because somebody rode them to a particular destination or got near home and they only have to walk a little bit to get in the door, maybe before mom and dad know they're going to be late. And so they just leave them on the neighbor's yard. People don't like that. They don't like them being left on the sidewalk. They don't like them being left in the playground. It just seems to me, and this has nothing to do with gray hair or age, by the way. I'm just saying that I feel like we're making a mad rush to get involved in something that seems to be the fad of the moment without really, truly understanding the ramifications. I have no problem whatsoever that we're considering what these various types of vehicles might bring to us. I certainly like the idea that we're looking at the potential for disabled people or seniors to use something other than the scooters, which are extremely expensive. Used golf carts can be purchased almost as inexpensively as a three-wheel scooter and probably are a lot more stable. So I certainly appreciate that. One of my favorite things about a golf course is driving the golf carts. My very favorite thing, actually. But I think that we're trying to create a bylaw to be ready for something we're not really ready for. Yes, they're fun when a local council invites us to come ride their scooters around their municipality, but I'm really quite glad they had the headache and not us. I don't mind that we would consider ushering this in, but I do have a concern about these things, and mostly, who's going to pay the bills when somebody gets hurt and the town gets sued? It comes back to our taxpayers, I believe. So right at this moment, I see a bylaw that's been rewritten to accommodate these and has some other things in it as well that I could be in support of, but I'm not feeling really strongly that I want to support this. When we're answering, the people in the know are saying there's confusion, and it is confusing, and I'm still a little confused about this. I'm confused. I'll guarantee you I'm confused. I read this portion twice. And I'm thinking about our residents, and I certainly hope somebody's tuned in tonight to realize they need to now go to the town website and read this cotton-picking agenda and see what's before us. I'm just concerned. And I'm paid to be concerned. So thank you for listening to me. And if anybody's got any answers to the issues I raised, I'd love to hear them.
Okay, was there a question in there?
No.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'm expressing a concern.
Okay, so if we can leave concerns, comments, and debate until a little bit later, let's ask questions of clarity and understanding. I'll accept the motion, and then we can debate after that.
You don't want me to repeat all that again, do you?
During debate, you're more than welcome to, Councillor Hansard, but this was as the presentation by administration. This was a chance to ask questions of clarity and understanding, and I think that's what we're here to do. We're not here to debate if it should be in or not. It is answering questions of clarity and understanding on the proposed changes of the bylaw. And then from there, once it's accepted as a motion, then we'll debate it if it should be in there or not.
Mr. Mayor, there were questions in what I said. I asked who's responsible if someone is injured.
Well, definitely, if there was a pilot project, then the people that are running the pilot project will be responsible. Yes, the town will be sued, and our liability will be negligible because there would be an agreement, just like everything else in the community. If somebody's driving a car within the town's towing plain and there's an accident, the town's towing plain is not liable for that but it's our road, it's our stuff.
But if
we allow cars to be on the roads.
With respect, if we agree to allow a company come to put them in.
Council will just, the question is that liability will be on the person that is running that program, period. And I think, did you have another question in terms of asking that? Okay, Councilor Plechko.
I think you covered what I was after. I was looking for clarity that we were supposed to be asking for, debate, and that is to be done a little bit later on once we have a motion in place. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. And members of council, I tend to let everyone go a little bit further than required, just because I want to make sure that things are captured. Councillor, no, Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to administration, I'll get away from e-scooters and e-bikes for a little bit, and I will talk about page 86 when it talks about the weight exceeding for the vehicles. I know I mentioned it before, and we're trying to make it more in line with the land use bylaw, but when you look up the specs for any type of Super Duty pickup truck, whether it be a Ford 350, 450, their weights exceed our maximum, but yet that can still be considered a family vehicle. So I'm curious, right, we're talking commercial use, but we're also saying maximum is 6,000 kilograms. 86. So my question is 6,000 realistic when you think of what our vehicles actually are? You see them driving around town.
Your Worship, through the Deputy Mayor. I'll maybe start the answer and see if the CAPS team has anything to add. I believe that the way that this bylaw is reading, it's about gross, it's the distinction between gross vehicle weight and the overall weight that you're referring to is the overall weight of the vehicle itself. So for commercial uses, which would not normally be something you consider in a personal vehicle. So if you're referring to an F-150 versus a large tractor trailer, for example, those would be two distinctions.
Can I? Yeah, I agree there's a big difference between a commercial vehicle and an F-150, but my question was an F-350, which can very easily be used as a family vehicle as well as a work vehicle. But our bylaw states on page 86, no person shall park a vehicle or vehicle with trailer attached to the registered of a weight exceeding 6,000 kilograms or weighs more than 6,000 kilograms on a highway in residential area except when lawfully engaged in delivery of persons or items in normal course of business. But if a person is using it as their personal vehicle, because we can go to Denny Andrews and pick up a Ford 350 and it would exceed that weight, and that would be considered somebody's family vehicle, are we saying they are not allowed to park on our roads?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Loynes, this is consistent with the land use bylaw. So if that in fact is the case with personal vehicles and weight classes, then we would have to also bring the land use bylaw back and update that number too. So we would have to verify that. I think the intention of this is a commercial vehicle doing commercial business, and typically those vehicles have more than the 6,000 pounds because they've got equipment and all the other types of things that they're using to do their particular job. For yourself, carrying a couple bags of groceries and driving on the roadway and parking in your driveway, I'm not sure that we're concerned about that typically. But if you're registering your vehicle to do a commercial job, you have specifics that you have to put on your vehicle in terms of weight and capacity, and you have to get licensing and the like. So I think the interpretation of the bylaw is specific to commercial versus your own personal and private vehicle.
Sorry, can I just point to clarity very quickly, sir, if that's okay? The bylaw speaks to 6,000 kilograms, which would be 13,000 pounds. And I believe just a quick Google search of how much does a Ford, Super Duty weigh, we're looking like 6,000 to 7,000 pounds. So
we're looking at 9,900 to 14,000 pounds.
And the bylaw would permit almost up to that 14,000
Almost up to
pounds.
that. But a Super Duty Ford 450 pickup truck, King Ranch, exceeds that weight.
Okay. Members of council, again, Deputy Mayor Loynes, again, that is under the section of 3.2, I believe. It is for only references commercial and heavy vehicles. So I think we have, the idea is that we understand commercial vehicles are not, and I think the question is, if somebody buys a personal vehicle, which is extremely heavy, does it still fall under that? Yes. So the difference between personal or commercial. I think The general manager kind of addressed that in terms of if it's licensed, it has its tar weight and all that stuff that is done as a commercial registered vehicle, then that will be considered a commercial vehicle, then therefore it's not allowed. But however, if it's just a F Super Duty heavy, whatever that is that you're talking about, and it exceeds that, but there's no markings on it, and you can see that it's not a designated commercial vehicle, then it would be allowed because then it's considered a family vehicle.
So it doesn't fall under heavy?
No. Okay. Any more questions for clarity and understanding? Okay. Just a question regarding page 85 in terms of no person shall park a vehicle so that exceeds 12 meters. I think the question was that attached to a trailer or not attached to the trailer? I think the answer was it's just the trailer itself. Is that correct?
Your Worship, if you look to page 85 under 3.223, no person shall park any vehicle with or without a trailer that exceeds 12 meters in length. So it could be a vehicle without a trailer, 12 meters in length. It could be a vehicle with a trailer. The total can't be more than 12 meters in length.
Okay. And then my second part of the question is that a vehicle exceeding 12 meters in length are permitted to park within the town in areas zoned as industrial in the land use bylaw. So in terms of that, that means every lot that is zoned industrial, does that mean that a trailer of 12 meters plus can park in front of that lot?
Your Worship, I'm just looking for clarification. Are you speaking about when they're parked on the private property on the lot, or when they're parked on the roadway in front of the lot?
In front of the lot, because it says that on that same paragraph where it says it's not allowed to park, but it is allowed to park within the town in areas zoned as industrial in the land use bylaw. So if an area is zoned industrial, then that means a trailer can be parked there.
That's correct. A vehicle exceeding 12 meters in length with or without a trailer attached would be able to be parked in the industrial area. They would still have to follow the other rules of the road. So they would not be able to block accesses to driveways, fire hydrants. They would have to park in compliance with any parking restrictions or parking signs that we have put up in the town.
So thank you. So as the town continues to grow and there's no, usually there's a few trucks and trailers I can see down by the railroad area. They're not permitted to park there because it's not industrial, but they are permitted to park in the North Industrial Park.
Your Worship, yes, that's correct. A vehicle exceeding 12 meters in length is allowed to park in the industrial area.
Thank you. Councillor Fletchko.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Let's go back to the 12 meters again. So we're talking commercial, correct? Or is that for any vehicle?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Palecho, it is for, it's not any vehicle. Town vehicles and recreational vehicles are exempt from that.
Okay, so here's a bit of a scenario for you. I run a commercial truck, and I have my RV hooked to it. Which bylaw applies? And I'm over the 12 meters long. There's many of them in our community today that run commercial vehicles that are weighted and licensed as a commercial vehicle, yet pull their local RV holiday trailer, and they continue to park them on our streets.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Palecho, currently the way the bylaw is worded, the exception would be if it was a recreational vehicle.
Okay. So the answer is if it's attached to a commercial vehicle, the answer is not allowed.
Your worship, through you to Councillor Pletchko, if I could just add additional, that is also a component of the weight that we were discussing a few moments ago, that 6,000 kilograms. A commercial vehicle like a semi-truck is going to exceed those weight restrictions in a residential area as well.
So we'll go back to that question, which is what I wanted to bring you back to, because many of the commercial vehicles, and I'll use an F-350 as a good example, is 14,000 pounds with an F-350 long box crew cab, 4x4, weighs just over 14,000 pounds, can be used either commercial or residential. Or non-residential. It can be used as a public vehicle. Some of them are rated for weight-wise, and a lot of that today is now weighted due to tire size and brake size in them, right? So we run into a bit of an issue when my commercial F-350 long box is hooked up to my RV in town. I'm plated commercial, but my holiday trailer is plated recreation. How does that fit within the bylaw? And I know there's a number of these vehicles within our community that are rated just like this. So which is it that applies to our residents, commercial or recreation?
Your worship, through to Councillor Pletchko, certainly you bring up a difficult and challenging scenario because, I've probably witnessed that in my lifetime too. I think our assessment would be at the time of, if we received a complaint, we would probably go and investigate, and if the vehicle exceeded in terms of was causing damage to our road systems, it was a semi-truck pulling an RV, then certainly we would have issue with that. Your F-350, all of your tools and everything are completely unloaded from your vehicle and you're pulling your RV trailer, probably at that point it would be an officer's discretion to determine whether or not it was being used as a commercial vehicle at that time or a recreation vehicle at that time. I think it would be difficult for us to write that scenario in this particular bylaw. I'm trying to, off the top of my head, I can't think of how we might address that in a particular bylaw.
I can appreciate where you're coming from, but this is a reality within our community, not just our community, many communities, and I think it's an issue that many communities are dealing with at this point in time when they're doing their traffic bylaws. And I'm just wondering, is this something that we need to look in further? And I can appreciate that we'd like to have our traffic bylaws passed and move forward and all of that stuff, but I think we really need to be doing our due diligence in today, because truly most of the guys that are pulling commercial vehicle or pulling with a commercial vehicle will have a toolbox in the back of it. And quite often the tools will be in it because they're using them for when they're sitting on a site at the lake, the RV, they'll use their chainsaw to be able to cut up the wood that they need to do. So, your perception of it being, or our CPO's perception of it being a commercial vehicle might be quite different than mine for the time that I'm using that. Time that I'm using it with my 35-foot gooseneck with a mulcher or a piece of equipment attached to it, then I can understand that. So we're using our vehicles today within the community for a multitude of things, and our bylaws, while I can appreciate, are sometimes quite difficult to deal with. I'm just wondering if there is a opportunity for us here to sit and look at this so that we can meet the needs of what everybody's trying to do in our community.
Your Worship, if I can maybe provide some comments / context, I guess. So I think what we're trying to discuss or work our way around a bit here is what behavior are we attempting to control or restrict? The example given, I know, again, up and down my street, there'll be a pretty big truck hauling a pretty good-sized RV or a wrecked vehicle of some sort. And for the most part, I think the vast majority of people in Stoney tend to behave accordingly. They might have it out on the front yard or the front street for maybe a day, and then it's backed up, and then it's so on and so forth. And I don't believe, in my experience, that's the behaviors that we're looking to, fundamentally restrict. I will say over my time here, we do get concerns from time to time about what is clearly being used as a commercial use, whether it's a good-sized vehicle and some sort of a trailer that, drywalling or plumbing or what have you, that's habitually sitting on a city street or a town street. I think this is the clause, that's the check and balance to be able to either respectfully ask that gets removed, or if need be, come with a little more weight through the bylaws. So I do understand there's a lot of scenarios out there, but I believe that the recreational use stuff they're only allowed on the front drives for certain times. There's other ways that we kind of control or try to deal with that behavior. And I don't believe this is the clause that we would look to, really regulate and restrict that sort of use. I'll just stop there, Your Worship. That's the context I believe we're looking to use, and that's why it does indicate the industrial. And as I think the peace officer supervisor indicated, it's not just the length that'll restrict these parkings, but it's access to driveways and 2-hour parking signs and can't park this close to the corner, and all of that other stuff kind of comes into play. So, Your Worship, I'll just stop there as a bit of context.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for clarity and understanding? Okay. See none. Thank you, Administration, for providing those updates, those conversations that we had during first reading, and providing those few changes that Council has mentioned, and in terms of what we see that can benefit our community going forward. Again, members of Council, this amendment coming forward was based on the fact that our CPOs have been enforcing the previous bylaw, and these are the changes that will come forward because of how they're interpreting it and allowing them easier access to be able to provide that safety in our communities. Councilor Laurie, for the motion, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. And before I make the motion, I just want clarity in respect to some comments that were made earlier in regards to striking a particular word from the document. Just so I'm clear, the motion that is being made now for the as amended is as is written in our council package with no changes, correct?
Your Worship, through to Councilor Laurie, correct.
Excellent. Thank you very much. With that, I'll move the Town Council give second reading to Traffic Bylaw 2677/G/23 as amended.
Okay, thank you very much, Councilor Laurie. And the members of Council, that as amended is the red line version that was part of our package and the cleaned up version. So as amended is because the first reading had some questions and concerns from members of Council. That was changed before bringing it back to second reading. So members of Council, questions, comments, and debate on the motion on the floor. Councilor Anderson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As came up for clarity a little bit earlier this evening, I will officially make the motion to amend section 2.220 on page 73 of our agenda package to strike out electric scooters in the definition of micromobility devices.
Thank you. Appreciate it, members of Council. There is a motion to amend. Debate on that motion. Councilor Hansford.
Your Worship, through you, could I pose a question to the mover? Through the Mayor to Councilor Anderson, striking the words electric scooter from the definition would assist in what way?
Thank you for the question. I think, based on the confusion that I had earlier, my intent of striking that word would be to bring clarity for our residents. As has been explained by administration, the current Alberta Traffic Safety Act does not permit electric scooters. Our bylaw as it's written appears that we would be allowing them. It is under that definition of micromobility devices. As we go down later within the amended bylaw here, it talks about micromobility devices being permitted on sidewalks, walkways, and those sorts of things. And so my intent of striking just specifically those words would be to fall in line with the Alberta Traffic Safety Act and bring clarity for our residents.
Thank you. Further to that, Mr. Mayor, that would mean then, should we wish to entertain at a future time e-scooters or a company wanting to bring them into our community as shared use, would that prevent individuals buying e-scooters and running them all over town, or would that have any effect on that? And also, would that I believe that eliminates a lot of the questions and concerns that I raised at the earlier time when it wasn't the best time. I guess I'm asking you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I think
or
administration administration will be, the bylaw says no, but the thing is in terms of enforcement, how do we enforce it? Because you can't prevent people from buying it within the town of Stony Plain or other municipalities and moving it into a community.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Hansard and the rest of the council, unfortunately, we're in a bit of a predicament in Alberta. Legislation says you can't have e-scooters, but they're permitted to be sold in Alberta. There's several stores that sell the devices, and the government hasn't put a restriction on the sale of those devices in stores. So, bit of a quandary in terms of we would be handing thousands of tickets out per month because there's a lot of these types of scooters trucking around Stony Plain, which is why we put some language within the bylaw that said the use of the person on the particular device is more important to us than perhaps the device that they're riding. Having thought about 2.2.0 again, it's simply a definition. And I do appreciate that micromobility is used as a word within the rest of the document. However, we do have a Traffic Safety Act that has other language that would cause us to say, that's not permitted under the Traffic Safety Act. Yes, we've defined an e-scooter as a micromobility, and we'd have to probably provide some education around it. But it's simply a definition that includes a host of things that are included as a micromobility device. I'm not sure where I'm going anymore, but we're in a tough spot, Councillor Hansard, certainly, because I can go to any store tomorrow and buy a scooter and ride it around, and likely if I'm doing it responsibly, I'm not going to have Tiffany on my tail with her lights trying to stop me from getting from A to B. We do have challenges with permitted e-devices in our community where they're not being used responsibly, and we certainly have to go and do our due diligence to enforce that behavior. I think what this bylaw is trying to do is try to articulate to people what we expect a good behavior for people in riding these particular devices, given the legislation that we currently have, our ability to enforce, and how we're able to allow these devices to function within our communities. So I think what we're trying to do within this bylaw is appreciate that they exist. We want people to use them responsibly, and if you don't, we certainly have outlaid what we might do related to the irresponsible use of the particular device. If Lime Scooters wants to come to Stony Plain, we certainly would have to come back and have a bylaw to permit that for sure.
Councillor Pletchko, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. As I sit here this evening, a few things come to mind. The first thing that comes to mind is we're talking about inexpensive devices that our residents are buying offline, online, to get around our community. Some of the things that we're missing, though, is they're also buying golf carts, they're also buying Segways, they're also buying a number of things that we don't mention in here at all. So there's the ability to buy a multitude of things, and we're trying to include some things and not others. I think the one thing that we all should keep in mind, and I'm here to listen to each and every one of you, is though, one of the things that we should keep in mind is what is allowed under the Traffic Act. What is things that are in our controllable future? I think that's something that we need to make sure is in our traffic safety bylaws. That's the most important. Not speculate on what's coming or what's the future. What we have to speculate on is truly what is available to us today that we have control over. And then if we want, we need to specifically create a bylaw, maybe somewhere down the road, that deals with the stuff that is not on our list. And today, if it's not on our list, maybe a CPO or yourself, Carl, can tell us what is the ability of our CPOs today to control stuff that is not permitted.
Okay, while they come back with that, and I think that's why we're trying to update this bylaws to provide some clarity, because if that is the case, then every mobility device that we see some of our seniors using, there'll be issued a ticket. And I don't think that's what we want, and that's why we're trying to, what's happening here is they're trying to address that, and then to me, it doesn't matter what the terminology of mobility device is in listing what it is there, because I think as Councillor was mentioned, we have those single-wheel powered unicycle ones, yeah, and everything else that is powered, but not manually. So that's not listed here. The Segways are not listed here. What is those called? Yeah, that's the Segways, right? With the 2 wheels and stuff. Yeah, and the single wheel. So those are all powered devices that provide mobility within community that people use, and some of it is used for mobility devices. I think the point that we should focus on is not exactly that, because 100% we cannot enforce everything, and as a member of this council, I would not like to see our peace officers giving a ticket to every senior that is on a mobility device because it's powered. What I tend to look at in terms of council and what we're trying to do is on page 84 of the bylaw. As mentioned earlier by the CPO Supervisor Anderson, is to regulate the usage and how the intent and the behavior of the usage. Right, so 3.220 is mobility devices. That could be anything. It could be assistive devices, it could be personal devices, it could be handicap devices, mobility issues that require that, or even powered wheelchairs. Is that considered a mobility device? If it goes over 25 kilometers, I think the idea here is how we kind of regulate how that is being used. If it's being used in a proper and safe manner, then I don't think our town has an issue with it. If it's not, then this bylaw with these changes allows peace officers to stop that individual and say, it's not used in a responsible way, here's a ticket until you get it. Right, so I think to list everything is defeating the purpose here. The idea is to get us started, and that 3.20 on page 84 is a defining factor of how we're not going to be, as a community, be able to give everyone a ticket and stop people from using mobility devices in our community. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Mayor Choi. I appreciate that bit of conversation, because that's what I was trying to get at, is specifically the stuff that we have control over today needs to be in our bylaw. Stuff that we don't have control over can come back at any time and be added to the bylaw, and I think that's important. So when we're talking about electric scooters, we have no control over it today. We would like to, but we have no control. If you want to buy them, you buy them for your kids, you buy them for yourself, and there's lots of them running over. So I think really what's important today is we make this bylaw for what we know and what we can control, and we trusted our CPOs and our administration to bring it back when we can put some control in it, and then at that point in time put it in. So that's kind of what I was trying to get at, was to make sure that we deal with what we know, not with what we would like to know.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions and comments and debate on that? Councillor Laurie, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and appreciate the commentary so far, because, again, premising the original motion here, which is a motion to remove the electric scooter terminology from 2.220, the premise of that is because it doesn't comply with the Alberta Traffic Safety Act. Yet on page 73, we also read that the electric skateboards do not comply with the Alberta Traffic and Safety Act, yet for some reason that's not included in the motion that's sitting before us right now. The problem is exactly as Councillor Palechko stated. It's in the definition. We are trying to define every single micromobility device and what we can and can't accept in the community. And I'm struggling to understand why we are trying to define it when, exactly as was stated, we have the Alberta Traffic and Safety Act that does define it for us. Personal use scooters are not allowed. However, there are companies that have received exemptions to the Alberta Traffic and Safety Act, therefore those would be allowed. So I'm not sure why, under the definition of micromobility devices, why doesn't it just state means a range of small, lightweight vehicles operating at speeds typically below 25 kilometers per hour as permissible under the Alberta Traffic and Safety Act. Hard stop. That there then provides the definition that of what we are referring to is a personal use device, a micromobility device, but then we are leading to the legislation that we are bound under the Alberta Traffic and Safety Act, and then therefore any changes to the Alberta Traffic and Safety Act mean we don't have to make any changes. Because when the Alberta Traffic Safety Act changes, our bylaw abides by it. So I'm fully not supportive of the amendment that's been put forth. I appreciate the premise as to why it's been put forth, but it doesn't solve the problem. And when we're done dealing with that, I will gladly put a motion on the floor to change the terminology of the definition of micromobility devices.
So before I go to Councillor Anderson to close. Sorry. Before I go to you to close, I will not be supporting the amendment, as I believe that I think the term micromobility devices does include electric scooters, e-scooters, because if you Google and you go into some of the kind of assistance websites, different providers that provide those mobility devices, e-scooter is listed on there as a mobility device. Throughout our community, I see a lot of seniors using a electric scooter, which is a three-wheel, going up and down downtown or streets and our pathways. That is an electric scooter. So I cannot support that, because if that's not there, then we're not given that definition to be able to use. And I don't like the fact of not having that in there, because this is going to be muddy, but I think it's probably better off left in there because that's what we have right now. Councillor Anderson?
Not something I expected to be maybe as heated of a discussion as it was intended. And so I do want to say a couple of things. One, the conversation around trying to eliminate transportation for seniors who have reduced mobility is not even a part of the discussion. Those are all outlined actually under a different definition under 2.24 mobility aid. And so for clarity's sake, please know that was not the intent of the motion at all, and that those are defined in other areas of the particular bylaw that's before us. It is just a definition. I think the comment was made. But when we go through the bylaw, if we come to a word that we don't understand, we go to our definitions. And so that's where that clarity comes from. With all that being said, the motion was put on the floor, my intent was to provide clarity to the residents. I think Councillor Laurie has provided an alternative to what I presented that would provide the clarity that I seek and then even take it to the next step. And so I would be happy to withdraw the amendment that I proposed and allow him to make the amendment that he spoke to in his commentary.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson. I appreciate that, and definitely I'll accept the withdrawal. And through the conversation, I think you're right. It's going to reach the same goal in the end with a different terminology without having to wordsmith and strike different items off the definition list. Councilor Laurie.
Thank you, Your Worship. And before I make the amending motion, I'd like to just request some clarity from administration and give them an opportunity to provide any commentary should they see a challenge with what is going to be the proposed amendment. So the amendment that I'm considering right now is in 2.22.0, is that after the word personally, we state as permissible under the Alberta Traffic Safety Act. We remove everything up to the word micromobility devices exclude, and then that part would remain. So essentially from where it defines all the individual items, so bicycles, electric scooters, non-motorized scooters, it would take that out, take the individual items out, and simply replace it with as permissible under the Alberta Traffic Safety Act. Does the administration see that causing any issues or challenges, or do they have any commentary on that?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Laurie. So as part of our research when we do the bylaw, Ms. Anderson also looks at case law around similar types of statements. So at this moment, we would not be prepared to say that that would meet the premise of the bylaw or not. The Traffic Safety Act has different language. They call them miniature vehicles, and Segways are included as a miniature vehicle, golf carts, go-karts, electric skateboards, scooters, and mini bikes. Those are called miniature vehicles as their definition, and they're not permitted on roadways in Alberta. So the e-scooter falls into that category of a miniature vehicle. Segway, under our current bylaw, we would permit that. Sorry, we would not permit that because it's in the Traffic Safety Act. So long and short, I don't confidently, we couldn't say yes, that would make some sense. We'd have to go back and look and see what the implications of adding that Traffic Safety Act alignment to after as you stated, after personally, how that would impact the overall enforcement of the bylaw.
Okay. See, and this is one of the issues that council also has to deal with, is trying to make a bylaw that covers everything. And sometimes it's not going to happen. Sometimes, again, this is coming forward because administration has tried to enforce different things within our community. And these were the best recommendations coming forward so that they can have a clear understanding to enforce it.
Your Worship, just for more clarity, the micro-mobility device, the reason why we landed on that particular definition is when we were reviewing other bylaws, that's where they're going. That's where they're gravitating to in terms of calling it micro-mobility. I'm not sure if Tiffany can articulate which ones she specifically looked at that included this, but definitely the industry is moving towards micro-mobility as a definition and the inclusion of these particular vehicles underneath that. So I think we were trying to be on the edge of making sure we're moving towards what others are, and that's why we looked at that in our research and felt that this might be the best direction for us to go this evening with a particular bylaw.
Councillor Hansard, I'll let you go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For clarity, we had a motion, an amendment withdrawn by Councillor Anderson. We have a new amendment before us. We do not have a new amendment.
No. We
Okay.
do not have a new amendment. We had a question that was asked.
A question about the possible putting forward an amendment. And we have not seen that amendment yet.
No, the question was how would that change the overall intent of the bylaw if we changed that down?
Okay.
I think that was mentioned by the general manager that the Traffic Act does not mention micromobility devices, and it's classified as something else.
Okay, so unless someone else comes forward with a motion, an amendment, you're going to let us know when we're going to vote on the motion. I would like clarification. We are not allowing e-scooters at this time because they're not covered under the Provincial Traffic Act. And we don't want to see seniors ticketed or punished in any way for using a variety of mobility devices. I guess I would need to know if that's clarified.
Okay, that'll be clarified when we get a motion on the floor. Currently, right now, Councilor, you had another question?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to administration. So given the commentary received from administration on the terminology that the Alberta Traffic Safety Act is using, in this bylaw we have in front of us, we have lumped together things like bicycles, rollerblades, inline skates there, inline skates and rollerblades, the same thing. We've lumped those in with now the e-bikes, the electric scooters, et cetera, under the micro-mobility devices. So I'm a bit perplexed here on where we go in respect to this, because we can't necessarily remove micro-mobility devices because we should still have recognition for devices that are allowable under the Alberta Traffic Safety Act. But currently, the way that it's written, it's confusing as to whether we are attempting, I'll call it, to supersede the Alberta Traffic Safety Act to allow e-scooters, e-bikes, et cetera, which is not providing clarity to our residents. So what does the Alberta Traffic Safety Act refer to bicycles, inline skates, et cetera, as if they're not referred to as the same as the electric scooters?
Your Worship, to Councilor Laurie, certainly we will look up that. We're certain that bicycles are included, but inline skates, those types of things, not confident they are or are not. So that's the work that is happening right now.
Okay, so further to that, Your Worship, at this point in time, I mean, it seems like we are still lacking a significant amount of clarity, and potentially, once we do receive clarity, there will be some significant changes required to either rewrite a section or remove certain sections. That I'm curious at this point in time, Your Worship, are we at a point where this should be returned to administration, or should we be continuing to press on through a debate tonight when we're not exactly sure what we're going to be debating?
Your Worship, if I can provide a bit of comment to that, yeah, Your Worship, I think at this point I would prefer that this gets sent back for some further consideration. We can take into account some of the dialogue here and come back, at a later date. I would expect reasonably quickly, within 4 weeks or so. I'm just offering my perspective that I think that might be helpful for all involved. I know we have some, definition reviews that we need to, I guess, look at and understand clearly. Your Worship, though, just a little bit further to that, I think should that be the direction of council to refer back for some background and some further information, I think if I could offer some advice to council, I think the other aspect to consider from a policy perspective is what is the general direction that council wants to go on micro mobility or whatever we want to call them. You know, in the past, council has adopted active trail networks and all kinds of aspects of looking to get the community moving somewhat away from vehicular use. And my understanding, my read generally, without getting into the very specifics of whether it's the bylaw or the act itself, is that part of the attempt here was to interpret that policy direction and allow for, you know, whether it's changed, again, we don't know exactly what the future will hold, but give us a bit of a perspective, or an opportunity to allow these as they become more prevalent, but manage the behavior as to their use. Some of that will be through the Highways Act in whatever way, shape, or form, speeding or whatever it may be. But again, I mean, the clauses for use also are effective in our trail systems. There's stuff that's related to our sidewalks where these things are parked or not parked, and so on and so forth. So, Your Worship, if I can provide some advice to all of council, I think it, at this point, is probably a reasonable thing to refer back, get a little bit of clarification, let everybody maybe sit on it for another week or two. I don't know that it's absolutely timely that these changes have to be made at this point. But again, some consideration as to the broad policy implications as, frankly, Your Worship, as opposed to, you know, the very, very specific details, because we could, frankly, be here for a long time going through those very specific details, frankly, Your Worship. So I'll stop there. That's my perspective.
Okay, thank you, Town Manager, for those comments. Definitely going to continue on with the conversation because there is a motion on the table to accept as amended, just for some more questions of clear understanding and a little bit of debate, and then weigh in terms of my thought process here, because there's some other issues within the bylaw that council may have questions of. John Manager, you had your hand up?
Yes, Your Worship. Just to add on to CAO's comments, and to provide some more clarity for yourself, Councillor Laurie, the reason why we coupled all of those particular micro-mobility devices together was currently we don't have the ability, someone on inline skates, as an example, being a hooligan, we have no ability to, so this kind of puts it into a bit of a, how do we deal with that behavior? So by calling it a micro-mobility device, which it is by definition, it allows us the opportunity to go and say, you're not using this thing accurately or responsibly, so here's your violation. I totally appreciate that it puts electric vehicles in with human-powered vehicles or devices, but a lot of these devices don't have a definition. They don't fall into a category anywhere. So this is our ability to try and put them into some sort of category so that we have some ability to enforce a behavior in the community that from time to time, and I wouldn't say it's a prevalent behavior that we witness, but from time to time there is the need for us to go out and address some of these issues. So I think in line with what the CEO was saying, it was more about the behavior related to what we're seeing as a trend, which will continue as a trend as we continue to move forward in this electric world.
Okay, thank you. Do you want another point? Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship. And so thank you very much for that. And I appreciate that because I do believe that that is the premise of it. And I think we are getting hung up on the difference between the Alberta Traffic Safety Act and our bylaw. So with that in mind, even though we mention e-bikes in here, e-scooters in here, the Alberta Traffic Safety Act still supersedes this. So while yes, there is a little bit of ambiguity and it's not as crystal clear as we would like it to be, the reality is if the Town of Stony Plain bylaw enforcement chose to enforce an electric scooter being an illegal vehicle on our pathway, we still have the ability to do so. However, our bylaw is more defined to the behaviors and the usage of these vehicles, not necessarily whether they are legal or not under the Alberta Traffic Safety Act.
Your Worship, through the Councillor Laurie, we would agree with that interpretation.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for clarification from administration, I noticed another thing that was a little bit more confusing to me, going back to heavy vehicles and commercial vehicles. On page 72, where it says heavy vehicles, it says a vehicle with a trailer with or without loading weight of 6,000 kgs or more, totaling a length of 11 meters. However, further down, that's on page 72. Further down on page 85, we're talking about 12 meters. So again, for clarification, talking about a larger size long box pickup truck and trailer for personal use exceeding 11 meters, or is it exceeding 12 meters despite weight?
Your worship, through the Councilor Loynes, we would just have to change that from 11 to 12. That was a miss on our part.
Okay, so it'll be consistent on both parts. So it'll be consistent on both parts of the bylaw. Okay. So members council, I think we had some good conversation here. I think there was a combination, a question about should we defer this. I will entertain a motion too, but I will not support it. I think, again, we're trying to get into the weeds of defining everything, and that's not what we're going to accomplish today. As mentioned by members of council, these devices are already in our community, but we have nothing to regulate them and how they're operated. This bylaw, even though it is not perfect, allows our administration the ability to regulate it on the use of behavior. If they're using it improperly, unsafe, in an unsafe manner, chasing people around, running into things, this bylaw allows our peace officers the ability to enforce that behavior and stop it. If we don't pass this now, then currently they're still here, but we can't manage the behavior. So I think this is the step that the administration is proposing, is to take one step further and say, okay, we know these things are coming to our community. Every sports outlet has these things for sale. Every mobility device supplier has these things for sale. We're not going to stop them from our community. And definitely we are not going to give tickets to everybody using one of these devices. So what are we going to do? We're going to regulate how they use it. If it's used properly in a safe manner within our community, then it is permitted. If it's not, then our peace officers have the ability to say, here's our traffic bylaw, you're not using it and operating in a safe manner, here's a ticket, and if we catch you again, here's another ticket, then the escalations and violations go up until it's seized or whatever that happens after that. But this is the ability for us to move forward in terms of community. I heard about the e-scooters that are for private, that are used in a shared. That is not in this bylaw. I think there's a couple of people that have mentioned it. If the town of Stony Plain decided to do that, then that would be a request to the government of Alberta, and then it'd be a pilot project. So that's not here for debate. The debate is this bylaw is to provide a little bit more clarity on some of the instances that our peace officers have faced, and it provides them the ability to enforce the proper use of those devices that we're seeing in our community. So I will keep the motion on the table as is. Okay. Members council, any further debate on the motion as amended? Councillor Hansard.
Mr. Mayor, my understanding, even though the town manager has suggested referring this motion for a bit more consideration to be brought back in a couple or 3 weeks or so, that basically you're thinking that that's not the wise thing to do at this point, because you really want to see this pushed through to give some authority to our peace officers to enforce bad behavior.
Well, Councillor Hansard, based on what was talked about, doesn't matter if it comes back in 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years. The issue is still, if it's not addressed in the Alberta traffic bylaw, we're going to have that same debate in this chambers.
Mr. Mayor, respectfully, I think we have answered a lot of questions in this conversation and debate. I'm just hearing still a fair amount of ambiguity, confusion, quandary, etc. A lot of answers have been provided. My position has moved, but not necessarily to wanting to vote for this amendment. Some of my concerns were answered in the conversation. So it certainly was not a wasted conversation.
No, I wasn't saying it was a wasted conversation, Councillor Hansard. I was saying that the conversation that we had has been beneficial. The ones that we're stuck on is the wording of e-scooter or not. And I think mentioned around the table is that they are in our community already. So the question is, does council want to ticket everybody that has an e-scooter in our community?
May I, Mr. Mayor? I don't think the conversation's around council wanting to ticket everybody. I think that's a bit of a stretch. As a huge proponent of adding e-bikes, to this particular bylaw, I'm having a hard time with the assertion that, my goal is to ticket everybody that rides an e-scooter, because that's not the intent. The intent of the original motion was just to provide clarity for our residents. It had nothing to do with ticketing or otherwise. And so I just want to make it clear that, I'm not saying that I want our enforcement team to go out and ticket everybody on an e-scooter. But the lack of understanding around even our table this evening and some of the confusion that exists there, will exist for members of our community as well. And so my sole intent in bringing the amendment forward this evening was to provide that clarity for our residents. And, if we, walked out of here tonight and somebody said, hey, are, e-bikes allowed on the pathways in Stony Plain, we could confidently say yes. If somebody said, are e-scooters allowed on the pathways in Stony Plain, we might say, well, kinda. We're not going to ticket if you do it, but it is in our bylaw, but that bylaw is superseded by the Alberta Traffic Safety Act, and now all of a sudden that ambiguity exists again. And so again, it's not trying to create issues for enforcement, it's strictly trying to create clarity for residents. The second piece of clarity that I want to just bring forward, and I did mention this a little bit earlier, but the differentiation between micromobility devices and mobility aids. So again, we're not trying to ticket, someone with a mobility need who is in a scooter. That strictly, by definition in our bylaw, is a pedestrian and would follow the bylaws that are related to a pedestrian on a mobility aid. And so, I think there's been some comments made around the intent here of not allowing seniors to use their scooters to get around and desire to ticket everybody. And neither of those things were true in terms of the intent of the emotion that came forward. And so I still believe that having the word electric scooter in there, as much as it is a nuance, if you will, does create ambiguity for our residents. If we look up alberta.ca, we go to principles of our creating a bylaw. It specifically says to create bylaws, or the goal, that are understandable, also enforceable, which we've talked about. And so, my concern is that if we push forward strictly as is, are we putting something out there that residents are going to have a hard time navigating? And that is my only concern. I'm not, advocating for some of these other things that maybe have been suggested around the table this evening.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Councilor Anderson. I appreciate those comments and definitely provides that clarity on your intent of the original motion earlier to amend. Councilor Plechko.
Yes, thank you, Worship. As I sit here and listen to things being pointed at that really aren't being pointed at or shouldn't be pointed at, I have some concern with this whole bylaw. And at the end of the day, pushing something through when there's been this amount of debate, and I think it's about an hour and a half, almost 2 hours, that we've been having this discussion about a traffic act that puts the responsibilities of our CPOs to be able to protect our community. Having this wait another 2 or 3 weeks, I'm not sure that I can see why that would make a difference on what they can do today to enforce the rules in our community. When it gives clarity to most of us within the room for some little bit of wording, and I did hear administration say that it could come back fairly quick. So maybe it's not 4 weeks, maybe it's 3, maybe it's sooner. But I do believe what I've heard around this table today is the ability of most of us in here to ask really good questions trying to define what is best for our people in our community. And I think we've crossed the road a few times onto some things that are being pushed that aren't true. We're not trying to penalize anybody, and I've heard that come out of a few of you tonight, which really has me troublesome. I think really where we need to go with this is, it's not the end of the world to have administration have one more look at this. And it is not the end of the day that they cannot enforce what we need to have enforced. So I would really encourage everybody today to take a deep breath and have this go back to administration for a short period of time and come back with some of the answers that we've asked for clarity. And especially with the stuff that's not in the Traffic Act that's listed in here, I think we still have the ability to be able to enforce what we need to do. And our CPOs do a terrific job in our community controlling what people are doing in our community. So I think this is just one more step in us being able to give them true clarity on what they can do.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fletchko. I think the only thing that I think when I read through this thing and heard the conversation and debate around the table, we're stuck on one word: electronic scooters. I think there was a mention that was changed in terms of 11 meters to 12 meters. We talked about if it was in the Traffic Safety Act or not. And everything what I've heard revolves around electronic scooters. I think Councillor Anderson made a really good clarification point. It was like, he just wants for clarity, is electric scooters allowed or not? So if we go, as mentioned earlier by Councillor Laurie, if we just add it to as regulated by the Alberta Traffic and Safety Act, then if it's not there, then it's not. If it is, then it is.
So I tend to agree with what you're saying, but I've also heard a few other things in there. We've got electric skateboards, we've got a few things that have come to light that nobody's really focused on. What they focused on, and I agree with Councillor Laurie, I like his wording, and I think it just gives administration a quick opportunity to go back and come back and tell us whether that wording works or not, or to rephrase the wording that is in here that makes it more understandable for our community. So all I'm suggesting is, it was a great idea that Councillor Laurie had. He had a great idea, and we just need to make sure that it can be enforced fully. And I believe our CPO and our community manager research everything that needs to be researched, and they know what case law is, they know a number of things, and when they bring that wording to us, it'll be much better than what we have today.
Okay, thank you. And I'll go to Councillor Laurie and then
Thank you, Your Worship. And I appreciate the comments from Councillor Pletchko, and I will say, there's a reason why I asked the question of administration before I put the motion forward to change the wording, because it changed the intent, and that was not my intent to change the intent. I believe in the intent that is portrayed in this bylaw right now. I believe that no matter what we say in this bylaw, these devices will still continue to exist in our community. If we change the wording to a point where it does not mention these devices and it only says as permissible under the Alberta Traffic Safety Act, then the only tool our enforcement services have to enforce it is saying that is illegal, and you get a ticket for riding an electric scooter. I don't think that, I know personally as a councillor, that's not what I'm looking for tonight. I'm not looking for us to say, exactly what was stated earlier, that anybody who rides one of these devices in the town of Stony Plain is going to receive a ticket. That is not what I am looking for. That is not what I want our bylaw to say. I want our bylaw to be forward-thinking. As mentioned, we have a great active transportation strategy, and I want to leave those options open, but I want to make sure that the behavior of the users of any mobility device is appropriate to where and how they are using those devices. So based on the feedback from administration, that's why I did not put my motion forward, because I'm not looking to change the intent of this bylaw. Do I agree that there is a small amount of confusion? Yes, there is a small amount of confusion. I'm not convinced that administration going away and coming back in 4 weeks' time will clear that up, because we're dealing with something that unfortunately, even at a provincial level, as we heard at our own conference for Alberta municipalities, is confusing. So until the Alberta Traffic Safety Act gets sorted out, we are probably going to be in this gray zone. We are probably going to be dealing with this confusion, and who knows what the next contraption that's going to be invented and is going to be the next hot thing to be sold on the market is going to be, and when that's going to come. Frankly, I'm supportive of the way that this is written, given that I feel that any of the changes that we've talked about tonight would actually be detrimental to the intent of the bylaw and the behavior that we are trying to control and have allowable enforcement on. So I want to make that very clear, because although I did speak to the amendment of potentially changing the terminology, after clarification from administration, I don't even agree with that.
Thank you, Councilor Laurie. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Going back to the wording on as per the Alberta Traffic Safety Act, that really opens up a lot of random doors, because when we ultimately fall back onto that, we could change everything that is listed here and say as per the Alberta Traffic Act. And it does leave our CPOs with such an opening of saying you're in trouble or you're not, even though it's up to interpretation. I find that if we were to fall back on that type of wording, and again, just to get away from e-scooters, I'll go back to commercial vehicles. Heavy vehicles aren't listed in the Alberta Traffic Safety Act, only commercial vehicles. So that would, again, open the door to the question of a Ford 450, Ford F50, anything like that. And so the confusion, I think, would only become greater than trying to be more specific. Understanding, yes, hot toy, e-scooters, electric bikes, skateboard, wheelies, whatever you want to use. Again, I do appreciate everything administration has done. I understand they're going to make a couple more tweaks yet, but that's where I sit with that. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Pletchko.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk one more time. Great discussion, great debate. When I read what we have here, I do support what's here, but I also think that if we're talking about micro-mobility devices, we have listed a small portion of them. Why have we not listed all of them? You know, when we look at the whole process here, if we're talking about what applies to the Traffic Act and what we're hoping for, we haven't addressed all of them, because I do recall not that long ago, administration saying we would not do anything with a Segway. And yet a Segway is not listed in the Alberta Traffic Act. So how do we list some and not others? And I think that's a part for clarity that, you know, I can support what's here, but at the same time, when I look at this and I look at mobility devices and micro-mobility devices, and I've heard that term used a multitude of times, if I turn to that page, it is very in-depth. It goes into, you know, it goes into the new cars that are four-wheel drive, the 4x4, the new cars that are three-wheel. It goes into the Segways, it goes into golf carts, it goes into trikes. I don't see them on there, and yet I've seen that new little electric trike running up and down our pathways not that long ago. So, you know, there's a number of things that come to mind when we sit here. We list some, but we don't list others. Where do we stop and where do we start? I guess if somebody could answer that question, I might be able to support this fully.
I'll let the administration answer, but I think that is the crux of this whole debate is what do we list and what we don't list. And I think there are going to be things that we are not going to cover on this bylaw. But I think the intent of the changes the bylaw brought forward by administration was to provide them the ability to address the behavior and the uses of them. So I think if there's other things that will come forward, I think I mentioned the power unicycles, and we all mentioned the Segways and stuff. When they become more in use, then that might be an issue to add to that.
Your Worship, just to provide more clarity, this micro-mobility device, we took it from Fort Saskatchewan. They're trying to deal with the same issues we're dealing with. This is what they came up with. They passed it May 10th, 2022. It's been in process for just over a year now. We're not aware of any challenges related to it. They don't have a scooter pilot program in their community. We could phone and get some clarity on whether or not they're seeing challenges related to this in terms of enforcement, but they were the best version of what we listened to in first reading related to some of the challenges that we're all having around electric vehicles and how they're used and how people move around our community under their power. So this was the best that we could come up with to allow our enforcement team and allow what we believed was where council was striving to go through when we get to 30,000 people, and this particular bylaw might survive that timeframe.
Okay, thank you for that commentary, and I appreciate the saying that this is the best attempt from the comments and commentary that administration has heard from council. So council, you have a couple questions here. There's a motion on the floor with those couple amendments that have been made that was adjusted really easily. Or is it another amendment to refer this back? I think I look at page 85, please. I think I brought this up earlier during questioning of administration in terms of parking. The very last, is it 85? Yes, page 85, where it says no person shall park a vehicle or trailer unless it's within the areas that are zoned industrial lands in land use bylaw. I'd like to ask administration to kind of tweak that a little bit, unless signed otherwise. Because I know in the industrial area, it is a lot of area, and there's also a couple streets there that are signed no parking. So to make it so it's clear that they're allowed to park in the industrial area unless it's signed not.
Your Worship, I think if we've deemed an area not permitted to park in a particular area, it wouldn't matter what type of vehicle you're driving. If it's a no parking zone, it's a no parking zone. So under your theory that you just presented us, technically then this person could park in a handicap stall, and they can't. So I think if we've deemed a location with no parking signs and signed it appropriately so that it's quite clear that you can't park there, then I think, even if it's in the industrial area, then no parking would supersede the fact that they could park in the industrial area, this type of vehicle, as long as the signs indicated no parking.
Okay, that provides enough clarity for me that, Councilor Hansard?
Your Worship, you just gave us a little bit of a wrap-up in preparation, I guess, for you calling the question. If you call the question and this motion is defeated, is it dead for how long, please? And if we then instead put forward a motion to refer, it automatically comes back. And we get another opportunity, hopefully not far down the road, to pass it with far more clarity and understanding. And a bit of distance tonight so that nobody's feeling like this is being shoved forward. So if it gets defeated, is it 6 months before it can come back? What happens to it?
Administration?
Your Worship, maybe do a quick check on some of the technical aspects there. But the motion as before, just to give second reading, if it's defeated, officially the bylaw would be defeated. It would be no longer on the table with council. How would it come back to council? Well, one way is that council can direct that, and there's either a motion can be made to direct it to be revised or reviewed or so on, and it would be brought back in front of council. Your Worship, I guess I'll just be clear. Frankly, there are things in the bylaw that we would need to and want to have altered, and I would probably, speak with council about a time where we would be bringing it back in the relatively near future, frankly, Your Worship, maybe with some alterations. But despite the dialogue on a couple specific things, There are other aspects of the bylaw that we wanted to clean up and amend and change and so on, so.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hansard, anything else?
Yes, Your Worship, I'd like to put forward a motion to refer this to administration to be brought back to council prior to Christmas.
Okay, so the motion is to refer traffic bylaw 2677G23 to be brought back before Christmas.
Yes, sir, and if I may tell you why?
Go ahead.
I don't want to see it defeated. I think the reason it came forward to us is there's a need for a bylaw. But we've had a long discussion, and I believe certain questions have been answered for me and others, but we're at a place now where I think we just need, let's have a moment of space, please. Let's get the clarifications in writing. Hopefully, it's not like another term paper for administration to bring us a little bit cleaned up bylaw that we can pass and put this in the hands of our peace officers before Christmas holidays.
Okay, thank you. I'll just double check with Legislative Services. The motion to defer, is it debatable or just call the question?
It wasn't defer, it was refer.
Refer.
The motion to refer is not debatable, only amenable to the advisability of who it's being referred to and the instructions related to the referral.
Okay, so definitely then the refer from Councillor Hansard was back to Community Protective Services. Is that correct?
That's my intent.
Okay, so it's not debatable. I'm just going to call the question. All those in, go ahead.
As the legislative service manager just stated, as part of that motion of referral would include instruction on why it's being referred. I didn't hear an instruction on why it's being referred. It's being referred back to administration for clarity on what?
Yes, okay, thank you. Councillor Hansard?
Sounds like a debate to me. Your Worship, I'm putting forward the motion to refer this to administration to address the concerns and ambiguity around the devices and around the devices that would be included in this bylaw when it comes back before Christmas holidays, 2023.
So Councillor Hansard, that'd be page 73, 2.220. Is deferring administration to review the items listed on under mobility, micromobility devices.
Sounds appropriate.
Okay. Council, you heard the motion to refer. It is not debatable, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, that is carried. Okay, let's take a 10-minute recess and we'll come back. Administration and those that are in the gallery and watching, council's come back from recess, and we're looking at our agenda number 9, which is business items. The first one is 9.1, the Stony Plain Public Library funding request. Go ahead, Administration. Anything else to add?
Your Worship, nothing more to add this evening.
Okay. Sounds good. Councilor Meyer, for the motion, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council accept the Stony Plain Public Library 2024 funding request for information.
Okay. Members of Council, we had the presentation earlier, some questions for clarity and understanding. Any debate on the motion to accept for information? Councilor Lowry, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Not necessarily a strong point of debate, but just clarification that based on the presentation this evening, I'm left with really no understanding as to what the increase that's being requested by the library is related to. And so I know the library did talk about having a separate document that kind of outlaid more of their budgetary requirements and where monies were going to be spent and where revenues were coming in. I'm extremely hopeful that council will receive that document, as I think that's very important to understand what it is that the library is really asking for, so I can make a determination as we move forward towards the corporate plan as to whether I would or would not support that.
Okay, thank you. And as in terms of our corporate planning, the addition, the request is not added to the corporate plan, but the amount requested would be on the side for council to add yes or no, and then that document will be provided at that time.
Your Worship, we can certainly provide the additional information within the next week or so.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Councilor Hansard?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this will come back to us with the status quo budget, or the request that they put in front of us, not including the 30,000, correct?
Yes, it'll be what we funded them for 2023, and then the request will be on a side note where council can decide to add whatever amount that they choose.
So in a way, this was their opportunity to speak to council about what they might have used that 30,000 for, correct?
That's correct.
And they didn't do it. But they did mention that somebody mentioned that the pay perhaps for the new manager, executive director could be higher. I would almost have preferred seeing a label put on that 30,000. So when we go into budget process, we know what that 30,000 might be for. And I believe our council appointee to that board has indicated that that was also an issue. The pay scale for that position might have been posing some difficulties. Nevertheless, I appreciate that we will have this in our corporate plan, so I really don't have any further question or comment.
Okay, thank you, and I appreciate that. I think the general manager indicated that we'll get that their detailed budget so that we can see where the extra dollar funds are coming from. Okay, any other questions, comments, and debate on the motion? Yeah. See none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay. Moving on to 9.2, the Yellowhead Regional Library. Administration, anything else to add?
Nothing further to add, Your Worship.
Okay. Councilor Anderson for the motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move that Town Council accept the Yellowhead Regional Library presentation for information.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments, and debate on the motion? Councilor Anderson?
Thank you, sir. Just a very quick question for my own clarity and understanding. When we're looking at the levies that were presented this evening, it does say proposed. My understanding is this is kind of a fee for service. If we're going to maintain our partnership with them, we're going to pay the levy rates that they charge us. Is that correct?
Your Worship, through to Councilor Anderson, that's correct.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. Just maybe a question to the YRL representative. In terms of talking about numbers earlier, we mentioned that the provincial government is funding the YRL or our municipalities based on 2019 data census numbers, but they're asking municipalities to fund the YRL to a 2023 projected population. Has there been talk around the table about how we kind of make sure that that's even for the municipalities? Because if we're using one set of data, then we should use it for both funding requests. If we're using the other one, then we should use both of them.
So if I recall the conversations at the YRL board correctly, a lot of the discussion was the aged numbers that we were using before. I believe YRL referenced 2016. I'm not sure if that's the exact date, but it was a fight to get anything updated. Any updated numbers. And so in terms of them being projected numbers versus actual numbers, that wasn't much of the discussion. It was more about updating from quite an aged census date. I think it was 2016.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Oh, see none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That is carried. All right, moving on, number 10 is council discussion. This is, excuse me, choked on my coffee. This is the time that we allow council to update members of council administration and ask questions that have been brought to them by the residents, anything that they want to share through the committees. Councilor Meyer, since you were last to speak, we'll start with you.
Nothing this evening.
Okay. Councilor Anderson, anything?
Nothing for me.
Councilor Laurie?
Nothing this evening, thank you.
Okay. Deputy Mayor?
Nothing for me this evening.
Councilor Hansard?
Nothing.
Councilor Pleshko?
Wow, a quiet council, everybody, but I'm not going to be that other one. I just want to say this past week has been a very ambitious week for all of us with the exchange students from Japan and their guests. We had a lot of events, we attended a lot of things, and they got an opportunity to go to a lot of things. So that exchange program is a phenomenal program that the town does. And I want to tell everybody that our administration does a phenomenal job of putting that together. They put a lot of time and effort into it, and it's a well-deserved program within our community. And I thank each and every one of you for the support that you give us as councillors to be able to be part of that, and the opportunity for the exchange, them coming here. And as well, you do that same program with our students going over there and the chaperones that go with them. So thank you for that, and thanks for the week.
Thank you, Councilor Bletchell. Yes, I'd like to echo that. Just this morning, our Chicago delegation left to go down to Drumheller, which then they'll be flying home in a day or two. So again, as mentioned by Councilor Pleshko, it's a great program for the town of Stony Plain and our communities around us, as it allows us to focus and highlight our cultural differences, our cultural similarities, and how municipalities look at each other in terms of the other side of the world. It gives us that kind of a fresh look, as we all hear the same saying, we only know what we know and we don't know what we don't know. So having that ability to have that cultural connection and some of those conversations with Chicago, our sister town, allows us to be better representatives of our own community. So thank you, administration, for doing that, and we wish our Chicago delegation all the best as they travel back home. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.